Chapter 870. In the eyes of most orcs, they look down on human women. With such a slender waist, wouldn't it be broken in 2 hits? With such a small butt, it would pierce his flesh in a few hits. Her breasts were not much bigger than a pear. Ah, she must have no milk when giving birth. This alliance messenger Jaina was really ugly. Feeling the disdain from his own orc guards, and even an orc who called Jaina an ugly woman at a volume of 100 decibels, Sal's eyebrows kept twitching. Sigh, the difference in aesthetics brought about by different races and styles was unbearable. As someone who had grown up among humans, Sal had completely accepted the aesthetics of humans. Like any adult male, he was shocked by Jaina's soul-stirring beauty. Back then, when Orgrim had stolen him from Gohalton Castle and sent him to Brill, Sal was still a slave gladiator. When he was growing up, it was as if fate had coincided. He met a servant who had immigrated from Hillsbrad. The servant had a daughter named Taretha Foxton. She was a little girl who had never seen war with her own eyes. Because of the death of her own brother, she projected Sal, who had been taken care of by her parents, as a substitute for her brother. She was not afraid of this green-skinned orc at all. She often taught Sal, who knew nothing about human society, many things in private. She secretly gave all kinds of books to Sal to read without his master's knowledge, and secretly exchanged letters with Sal for many years. Taretha's behavior was not only like a kind mother, but also like a good sister who took care of her brother. She cultivated Sal to be a good leader who was both tolerant and dignified. Even though Sal had been separated from Teresha when he broke free from Briar's cage, at this moment, for some reason, he felt that Teresha's voice and appearance overlapped with this female emissary of the alliance in front of him. Sal sat on the rough chief's throne, opened his arms, and spoke in the common human language with a Lordaeran accent. Hello. Messenger of the alliance, I am the current chief of the tribe, Sal. May I have the honor of knowing your name? Beautiful lady. To everyone's surprise, Jaina bowed slightly and replied in the Blackrock tribe's orc language, Good day to you, strong great chief Sar. I am Princess Kurtiras of the Human Kingdom, leader of the Kalandor Pioneers and Alliance Ambassador Jaina Proudmoore. Almost all the orc guards became excited when they heard this. Proudmoore. A ferocious family named second only to Marcus among the older generation of beastmen. The old warriors who had experienced the second battle of the Dark Portal might not understand why Duque was the mastermind, but they definitely knew that the fleet that buried hundreds of thousands of elite orcs was the fleet of a man named Proudmoore. Not only that, but this woman also claimed to be the pioneer of Kalandor. Did this mean that the despicable humans had tricked them out of the human territory, and now they wanted to take over this barren land that the orcs regarded as their own backyard? The orcs were clamoring. However, as Sal suddenly raised his hand, all 5,000 beastmen instantly fell silent. Even though many of the green-skinned beastmen were red in the face, no one dared to make a fuss or attack Jaina. Even Jaina, who was used to seeing the elites of the Alliance, was secretly shocked that Ling Xing's actions had reached such a level. Sal's voice sounded again. This time, he spoke in the orc language, although I would like to say, welcome. The word, welcome, has always been reserved for our own people and friends. I just don't know if the emissary's intention is war or peace. Jaina shook her head slowly. Chief Sal, Brill, where you grew up, is still a paradise for the undead until I speak to you. The war has not ended, but it is not a war between the Alliance and the Horde, but a war between the living and the dead. If the silence just now was the silence of people panting and suppressing their anger, then the current silence had evolved into absolute silence. Almost every orc sucked in a breath of cold air. From the slightly stifling battle in Dalaran's territory to the continuous stream of injured orcs turning into ashen undying beasts, the undying realm. Every orc present had experienced the horror of the undead army. Even on the ships that came here, there were still some orcs who concealed their injuries and turned into undead along the way, harming their own compatriots. There were a total of 13 ships that, because the captains were soft-hearted or careless, didn't control the undead well or disinfect them, and as a result, these ships all turned into ghost ships floating on the endless sea. Sal and Wajin looked at each other and then nodded to Varrock, who was leading the army. He stood up and raised the hammer of destruction, to announce to the orcs, for the time being, the grievances between the alliance and the horde will be put aside. In order to let the dead rest in peace and let the living continue to have the right to live, I declare that the alliance emissary is a friend of the horde. Everyone, dismiss. The horde's 5,000 orc army dispersed in an uproar. This allowed Jaina's heart to relax a little. Woken made an inviting gesture and led Jaina to follow behind Sal into the great chieftain's tent, which was as tall as 3 people. Sal sat down on the most gorgeous velociraptor skin in the tent. When he invited Jaina to sit down, Jaina didn't hide her disgust. With a flick of her finger, a chair made of pure ice suddenly appeared under Jaina's buttocks. Stopping the guard, Sal frowned slightly. Lord Proudmoore is a mage? Yes. Radiant Moon. Although he didn't understand why Duque sent such a mage and princess as an emissary, this couldn't stop Sal's curiosity about Jaina and the current situation of the alliance. Sal, who couldn't know the situation on the other side of the sea, was now at a loss. He hoped to meet a more immature diplomatic emissary than him, which would give him more initiative in the following negotiations. Sal was indeed very smart, and he had also seen the human world. Unfortunately, many things in the world were not equal. He had been in Lordaeron for a long time, so he couldn't understand how advanced the technology in the southern part of the continent was. Also, because of the unequal intelligence, he couldn't judge the intention of Jaina's next words. After all, Sal was only a 15-year-old boy. No matter how talented he was, there was still a huge gap in experience between him and Jaina. If Orgrim was still there, it would be better. Unfortunately, the only advisor around him was Wajin, who also knew little about human society. At this point in time, although Wajin was wise, he was just a country bumpkin who had just escaped from the jungle of Stranglethorn Vale. When Jaina spoke, Sal and the others were perfectly led. Chapter 871. A truly outstanding lie that could deceive people would be 90% true and 10% false. As long as the most critical point could be deceived, it would be considered a real success. Jaina portrayed herself as a half-baked pioneer who relied on her powerful magic to climb to a high position, befitting her noble identity. In the following conversation, she revealed the predicament of the alliance, intentionally or unintentionally. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to be honest. The alliance is in the biggest crisis since its establishment. The capital of Lordaeron, the leader of the alliance, has fallen because of the rebellion of the fallen prince. The current situation is that the king of Lordaeron has been killed, and 2/3 of the territory has fallen into the plague. The Dalajan has been destroyed, and Antonidas has been captured and turned into a great lich. The Stormguard king Galan Trollbane has been turned into an immortal, and Gilnas has been defeated, and was forced to release endless werewolves from the Emerald Dream. If Jaina deliberately leaked the information, it would undoubtedly be extremely stupid to expose one's own weakness on a diplomatic level. A weak alliance would undoubtedly weaken one's bargaining chips in negotiations. On the other hand, it could also be used as a warning to the enemy. Lordaeron, Dalajan, Stormguard, and Gilnas were all countries that had dealt a heavy blow to the Horde during the previous battle at the Dark Portal. The bravery of the soldiers of these countries was still deeply imprinted in the hearts of many of the older orcs. However, such powerful countries had all been destroyed. One could imagine how ferocious the Calamity army was. In the imagination of the orcs, the fall of the capital, the death of the king, or the death of the king, was definitely a state of annihilation. The intuition of the orcs was amazing. Coupled with the mysterious shaman witchcraft, if Jaina were to lie, Thrall would see through her at any moment. When that happened, it would not be fun. However, every word and situation that Jaina said was the truth, which made it seem like the other things that Jaina said were more like arguments to boost her morale. For example, but we are not afraid. We still have the strongest commander of the alliance, Duke Marcus. He and the Stormwind army led by Sir Lothar, together with the tanks of the Iron Furnace Fort. A total of 200,000 troops are landing in South Shore. We will definitely recover the entire Lordaeron continent. Was Thrall worried about Duque? Of course. However, at this moment, Azeroth, the best actress of the year, Jaina, had already led Sal and the rest into a trap. How could Sal possibly know that the situation in Rotterdam was actually far from what they had imagined? The next scene was even more exciting. Just as Jaina was complaining, Varrock came in and said, "Great Chief, a human guard insists on interrupting your meeting with the Alliance emissary. He wants to inform the Alliance emissary directly." Sal said, "Let him in." An Alliance guard was led into the tent by Varrock. He hurriedly whispered something to Jaina. Jaina shuddered and gritted her teeth, as if she had decided to confess. The latest news is that the Scourge used the traitors of the Silver Moon Council to attack Kuel's Salis with the teleportation circle. Now that Silvery Moon City has been destroyed, Breaking Dawn Archmage Anastrian Sunstrider, the king of Kuel's Salis, has joined the Scourge army and become a great lich. In the end, Jaina added, "I already knew that the Doomsday army had their eyes on the High Elves. I just didn't expect it to be like this." Jaina's bitter and embarrassed look made the young Sal's heart soften. At this time, Jaina said, "It is precisely because we are worried that the situation in Lordaeron will collapse. If we do not handle it well, even Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in the south will not be able to defend. So Commander Marcus sent me to lead a group of refugees to the west to cross the Endless Sea and build a refuge in Kalimdor. This time, I came to ask the tribe to temporarily not attack the refuge built by the Alliance on Thermore Island for the sake of us all living beings." As soon as this sentence came out, Sal, Wajin, and other tribal leaders suddenly had a sense of resonance with the people who had fallen into the same predicament. It turned out that the once incomparably powerful Alliance had fallen to this point. For a moment, even Sal and the others felt their hearts sink. After Jaina put out a lot of useless non-aggression treaties between the Alliance and the tribe, Sal politely asked Jaina to go and rest first. Then, of course, it was a closed-door meeting of the tribe leaders. Sal spoke first. "What do you think of the proposal of the Alliance this time?" Varrock Seraphar gestured at the rough map in the big tent. The current map in the tribe's hands was so rough that there was no shadow, only a scribbled coastline and a few general areas. Except for Duroder, which was a little clear, the barren land in the west, the Stonetalan Mountains in the west, and the Dust Wallow Swamp in the south were all blurred. Varrock gestured for a long time, but still frowned and said, "Too close." Yes, Thermore was too close to the tribe's new capital. It was like a sharp dagger hanging around the tribe's neck. In case the Alliance went to war with the Horde, the Alliance's fleet could sweep the entire east coast of Duroder and the Echo Islands where the trolls lived within 3 days. Sal did not speak, he looked at Wajin. The troll leader said, "As an emissary, she must have a lot to hide. But everyone will have their own secrets in their heart. My intuition tells me that every word she said is true." Varrock nodded, "I also think it is true. We have all seen how terrifying that damn undead legion is. It is not unusual to have such a result." Sal sighed, "Then we have a conclusion. Let's accept this alliance for the time being. In case something goes wrong in the future. Let's destroy Theramore's alliance first, don't give the alliance a bridgehead to step into Kalimdor." Half a day later, Jaina returned to Thermore with a 5-year non-aggression treaty between the alliance and the Horde. When she returned, she found that the magic communication array with the Eastern Kingdom had been set up, so she sent the message back, along with what she had seen and heard. In her bedroom, Jaina used a basin placed in the middle of the room to wash her feet while humming happily, "Humph. Let me develop with peace of mind and nail Theramore to the Kalimdor continent. Stupid orcs. You dirty green-skinned creatures are only worthy of drinking the princess's foot-washing water." At this time, a sudden voice came, "Well, you did a good job this time. Sal really should drink your foot-washing water." The voice almost scared Jaina to the ground. Chapter 872. No one could easily pass through a Radiant Moon Mage's perception and sneak into her mage tower, even if it was an incomplete mage tower, unless they were much, much stronger than the Radiant Moon Mage. When Jaina looked over, she was furious. "Duque, you bastard. Why are you here? At least knock on the door. Why did you barge in?" At this moment, Jaina's clothes were still very tidy. Her upper body was still that silver breastplate, but her robe was lifted, revealing 2 plump white thighs. She was just washing her feet. Was this exposure? Duque didn't think so. Although it was pleasing to the eye, Jaina felt that Duque was invading her privacy. A few arcane missiles hit Duque's face, the magic shield in front of him. Jaina obviously knew that it was useless, but she had to vent her anger. Sometimes, Duque really didn't understand women. Why did Azeroth women like to wear 3-point armor? It didn't matter if a large part of their skin was exposed to the air, but she got so excited just seeing her thighs under her robe. Why did Alucia get so passionate when she was playing human alchemy with him, and then chase him out after changing clothes? Well, men probably wouldn't understand this kind of thing about modesty for the rest of their lives. Duque, this idiot, actually added fuel to the fire at this time. Didn't you say last time that you could let me take a treasure that you've preserved for 27 years at any time? Why is it like this just looking at your feet, you bastard? I've changed my mind. If you have the ability to bring me the title of Lady Marcus, I'll give you my treasure immediately. Jaina showed her power, and this time she started throwing big fireballs. Duque had no choice but to bitterly be a target, using his magic shield until Jaina calmed down. After a while. Have you calmed down? No. Jaina gritted her teeth. Oh. Then continue. Damn it. Duke, come here and let me bite your arm. Swear that you won't enter my Magus Tower without my permission again, and we'll call it even. Are you a dog? Duque replied timidly. Are you coming over? If you dare to run away this time, I'll abandon Theramore and go back to the Eastern Kingdom to tell everyone that you've abandoned me. Jaina gave an ultimatum. Duque gritted his teeth, resigned himself to his fate, swore an oath, and extended his hand. Ah, it was a heart-wrenching howl. Who was it that was screaming in the silent wizard tower? In the end, was it a tragedy of human relations? Or was it a terrifying supernatural phenomenon? Please listen, poo. When Duque came back to his senses, he felt that it was really painful. What happened next left Duque scratching his head in confusion. Jaina did bite, and when she let go, a deep but small bite mark was left. One moment, Duque was on the verge of tears, and the next moment, Jaina quickly applied the red healing holy water produced by Stratholme on Duque. Seeing Jaina treat his wound with great care, and even licked away the few drops of red medicine that flowed out with her small tongue, the shameless Duque suddenly felt that Jaina was actually quite sexy. Sensing that the atmosphere had become ambiguous, Jaina acted like a dead pig unafraid of boiling water. What, you're finally moved by me? I really don't understand why you've been avoiding me for the past 10 years. Alright, it's too late now. You're already the queen's husband, and no matter who you marry, Curtilas won't be able to handle it. We won't have a future together. Duque was embarrassed. This was the downside of magical communication. She was too well informed. Sensing that the atmosphere had cooled, Duque did not continue playing with fire. He began to ask Jaina about the details of the mission. After that, Jaina asked, you wanted me to build a bridgehead and balance the relationship with the Horde, and I did it. What's next? I don't know why Archimonde hasn't come to Kalimdor for so long. But once he comes, the war over the Well of Eternity will be unavoidable. When that time comes, the opportunity for the Night Elves, the Alliance, and the Horde to unite will appear. Jaina suddenly asked, are you confident that you can deal with Archimonde? If it's just the Alliance, about 30%, and the price will be the destruction of all the Alliance's elite troops. Jaina was very smart, and she immediately sensed what Duque was thinking. It wasn't that the Alliance couldn't fight the Burning Legion alone, but the price would be too high. If the Alliance really sacrificed everything for the world of Azeroth, it would be the rise of the Horde, and the destruction of the humans, elves, and dwarves. Duque was doing this because he wanted to shoulder the burden and dig a pit together. Her mission this time was actually a covert move against the Horde. At the very least, it would force the Horde to go all out. When the time came to face the Burning Legion, who would survive would depend on their own abilities. Jaina was silent for a while, then changed the topic. Senior brother Ronan, I've already sent a ship to Azhara. As long as he's not too unlucky, with the strength of him, Lilith, and that Miss Abendis, it shouldn't be too big of a problem for them to contact the legendary night elves. Duque said in a low voice, "All right, now we just have to wait for the opportunity to join forces." "Do we wait for Archimonde to come?" "No. If we wait for Archimonde to come, it'll be too late." Duque tried hard to recall this part of history that wasn't completely unrecognizable. It wasn't easy to stop Archimonde's attack. After Archimonde came ashore, the commander of the Burning Legion would fly into a rage and summon a large number of Apocalypse Guards, as well as the elites of the Scourge army. If they wanted to face Archimonde directly, they had to at least get rid of his lackeys to force him out. Thus, the most ideal situation was to set up defenses at Mount Hyjal, the home of the Night Elves, before Archimonde set foot on the Kalandor continent. Suddenly, a silver magic lamp lit up on the highest floor of the Mage Tower, blinking. Jaina snapped her fingers, and Egwene's voice sounded. "Apologies for interrupting your reunion. A messenger from the Horde riding a wyvern just came to our northern sentry tower. He said that the Chief Sar wants to see you urgently, and hopes that you can go as soon as possible." Jaina and Duque looked at each other. "I'll be back soon." 10 minutes later, on the other side of Orgrimmar, a magic circle surrounded by orc guards began to glow. That was the magic formation that Sar had allowed Jaina to use when she needed an urgent visit. Brock, who had been waiting for a long time, was stunned when he saw Jaina appear on the magic formation with 2 female magician guards. He then said in broken common language, "Lady Jaina, follow me." Chapter 873. Sal was very worried. He did not know if he had made the right decision by asking Jaina to come. It was not a good thing for a young leader to show his weakness to an alliance that was once an enemy. Wajin gave Sal determination. "We have no choice. If the other party can easily destroy such a powerful clan in the Horde, they have the ability to destroy all of us, even Theramor's alliance advance force. The weak had to stick together. This was an unchanging law." After seeing Jaina, Sal's first words were, "The Warsong clan of the Horde is in a place called Grey Valley in the north. The entire clan, along with 5,000 workers, nearly 30,000 people, are missing." Jaina's face was full of shock. Although she did not personally experience the second battle of the Dark Portal, Jaina had been trained by someone who had thrown her into the Tirisful woodlands in a world of ice and snow. Jaina was very clear about how powerful the 20,000 Warsong tribe beastmen were. But the change in her eyes in the next moment betrayed her inner thoughts. Sal suddenly lost his voice. "You know what's in Grey Valley? Damn it. This orc is too smart, and his intuition is too amazing." Jaina spat disdainfully in her heart, but she could not show it. If she guessed correctly, this might be the opportunity that Duque had been waiting for. "Maybe I know. If you can, for the sake of the new common threat, please tell us." Jaina took a deep breath. "Do you know the High Elves?" Sal nodded. "I've heard of them from the former Chief Orgrim, and I've occasionally seen a few of them in Lordaeron." "Then do you know that the High Elves were actually exiled by their compatriots thousands of years ago, then crossed the Endless Sea to reach the Eastern Kingdom, and finally established their own kingdom in the northernmost part of the continent?" "You mean, the Night Elves? This is a tribe that only exists in the ancient legends of the High Elves. Even the High Elves themselves have not seen them for at least 7,000 years. In the entire alliance, we are not even sure if they still exist in the world. But if there is a force in the north of Kalandor that can annihilate more than 30,000 orc elites in one go, I can only think of the Night Elves." Sal anxiously asked, "What are the characteristics of the Night Elves that you know?" Jaina glanced at Wajin, who was not far from Thrall. "Legend has it that the ancestors of the Night Elves were also trolls, so their characteristics should be more similar to forest trolls. However, when the Night Elves exiled the High Elves, the Night Elves were ruled by druids who advocated nature." "Oh no." Thrall's face turned pale. "I sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees. If you don't court death, you'll die." There really was no limit to courting death. Duque only revealed the knowledge that Jaina needed, so Jaina couldn't know more. It was enough to tell the tribe that they had provoked an ancient and powerful race. Jaina still remembered what Duque said to her before he left: the night elves should exist. However, they were a race even more stubborn than the high elves. They needed an opportunity to break through their self-imposed blockade. Don't worry, we don't need to do anything. According to the characteristics of the tribe, they will definitely clash. Which of the high elves are the night elves more inclined toward? The rangers. However, their love for the forest is more extreme. Back to the present. After hearing Thrall say that he had sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees, Jaina really laughed out loud. The night elves loved nature and regarded the forest as their life. If they met a tribe that insisted on cutting down trees to build houses, it would really be laughable. As Jaina expected, the Warsong clan was in huge trouble. Everything was fine at first. After entering Grey Valley, Warsong first carefully cut down trees on the periphery. However, Grom soon found that the trees on the periphery of the forest did not meet the requirements. They were too young. In a great city, the taller the better, the thicker the better, the stronger the giant wood. Without finding any danger, Grom waved his hand and divided the clan into 4 groups of 5,000 people. They surrounded the woodcutters and set off into the depths of the forest. After 2 days in the forest, they found the giant trees they wanted. However, in less than an hour, a nightmare came. It was a silent, swift arrow from the darkness of the forest. It was as dense as heavy rain, but as accurate as a poisonous snake. They aimed at the vulnerable eyeballs and unprotected throats of the orcs. The warriors of the tribe were never afraid of arrows from the front. Even when facing a dense array of arrows from the humans, they were confident that after a certain amount of sacrifice, they would be able to pull the battle into close combat. Not this time. The mysterious enemy used the essence of guerrilla warfare to the extreme. They attacked and ran, and all of them were killed in one shot. Before the orcs could rush over, the enemy would disappear into the forest like a ghost. Most of the time, entire squads would perish in battle without a sound or a trace. In just half a day, the Warsong clan was forced into a desperate situation. More than 10,000 Warsong warriors had fallen in the forest, and the 5,000 woodcutters were almost completely wiped out. Grom tried to lead his people out of this desperate situation, but the enemy was still relentless in their pursuit. Any shouts would be met with silence from the other side, replying with even sharper arrows. Grom despaired until he smelled a familiar scent, the scent of demon blood. Why would there be demon blood in the forest that he had not seen for 20 years? Grom's first thought was that this was a demon's plot. But did he have a choice? Drink. Perhaps he and his people still had a way out. Not drinking. It was total annihilation. Grom Hell roared, his eyes bloodshot. Since you want me to die, then I'll kill you first. Grom led his clansmen and drank the devil's blood without hesitation. The earth-shattering roar echoed in the forest that had been silent for nearly 10,000 years in Grey Valley. The night elves besieging the orcs would never have imagined that the green-skinned creatures would suddenly become many times stronger in just an hour. What used to be a vital point was no longer a vital point. The throat that could be pierced with one arrow seemed to be covered by a thick layer of rhinoceros skin. The arrows that were shot at the eyeballs were all deflected away by the orcs' movements and reactions, which were much faster than the orcs. The fallen orcs' speed, strength, and agility far surpassed the night elves. They caught up to the night elves and killed them one by one. They cruelly dismembered their corpses and even chewed on their flesh. Finally, Grom saw the enemy's main character appear. It was a mysterious male with an elf's upper body and a stag's lower body. Chapter 874. On the other side, while Sal and Jaina were discussing the disappearance of the Warsong clan, new news came. Sal cried out, "What? Has the Warsong clan gone mad? Even attacking their own people without distinguishing between friend and foe? Like the old batch of orcs who drank the devil's blood?" In the face of a poison like demon blood that could make orcs crazy, Sal would rather hear about the Warsong clan's rebellion. It had been 20 years since Grom drank demon blood for the first time. Sal would always remember how violent and painful the old orc was when he saw the demon blood act up when he was young. When he received the news from the Warsong clan, Sal was very annoyed. The Horde didn't have magic communication. With Orgrimmar as the center, the Horde's forces were expanding to the barren lands. Now, the Horde had a vast but barren territory. The only thing that maintained such a large territory was the wyverns raised by the Frostwolf clan. There weren't many wyverns in the Horde, which were large enough to carry orcs in flight. The only 30 or so were all used for communication. Even with the wyverns, there was still a delay in the transmission of information. Sal had no idea what was going on. "Sorry, Princess Proudmoore. It seems that I have to leave today. After all, the Warsong clan is out of control." "This is too serious for the Horde," Sal said. Just as Jaina was about to say something, she received a shocking magical message. Duque's voice in the message was extremely urgent. "Jaina, come back to Theramore immediately. Something big has happened to Kurtiras." Jaina's face turned pale. She threw a magic messaging crystal to Thrall and said, "This is a magic locator. When you're in an emergency, crush the shell of this thing. Hold the white bead inside and imagine the terrain around you. I should be rushing over to help you." With that, she didn't hesitate to activate the teleportation spell in front of Sal, turning herself into a stream of light and flying to the set coordinates in Theramore space. When Jaina returned to Theramore and her vision was restored, she felt that something was wrong. Standing at the door of the teleportation hall, Duque's face was sullen. In her impression, Duque was always full of wisdom and foresight. It was as if the development of everything in the world could not escape his expectations. But now, Duque's face, which was a mixture of shock and bitterness, was clearly telling her that something unexpected had happened, and it was related to her. A sense of foreboding filled Gianna's chest. "Duque. What happened?" Duque didn't know what kind of expression he should use to face the anxious Jaina, nor did he know what kind of tone he should use to answer her questions. After taking a deep breath and remaining silent for 3 seconds, Duque said, "The first fleet of Kul Tiras and Kul Tiras were attacked one after another. His Majesty Daelin and His Highness Tandrid's family. Something happened." As if struck by lightning, Jaina's mind went blank. "No. This is impossible, this can't be true." Gianna felt dizzy and almost fainted on the spot. Duque hurriedly held the limp Jaina in his arms. He could clearly feel that the body of this superheroine in history was no different from that of a weak woman who had gone through a drastic change. Gianna could only feel the heat in her body flowing wildly into some unknown hole. So cold. She almost subconsciously hugged Duque tightly. She needed the little warmth from that masculine body. Duque just sat on the ground and hugged Jaina quietly. How much time had passed? 1 minute? 5 minutes? Or a century? She didn't know. After a long time, Jaina finally regained her senses. "Has the news been confirmed?" Jaina raised her head in grief. Her once bright red lips had lost their color and were turning white. "The remnants of the First Fleet have reached the shore. His Majesty Daelin is in Theramore." The world seemed to be collapsing. Jaina staggered and almost fell out of Duque's arms. Duque quickly put his arms around Jaina, who was as soft as mud, and hugged her again. After an unknown amount of time, Jaina regained her strength. "Help me." Duque silently did as he was told. Sure enough, Jaina in this life had not experienced the battle to eliminate the plague with Arthas. She went straight to Theramore. Her experience was lacking, and her mentality was not as calm. Just like that, Duque helped Jaina out of the lowest floor of the Mage Tower. Surrounded by a group of guards, they arrived at the newly built medium-sized church in Theramore. Through the open door. What did Jaina see? Her father, who she had cursed countless times but was like an unkillable cockroach, who had miraculously survived time and time again at sea, was lying coldly on the altar in the middle of the church. His lower body was covered with the flag of Kul Tiras. He was so quiet, a far cry from the father who always spoke in a loud and gruff voice in her memory. He had deliberately alienated her because of the royal power, treated her indifferently, and exiled her in disguise. All the accumulated resentment disappeared at this moment. Jaina struggled to leave Duque's support and threw herself on the altar. She touched her father's body with trembling hands. Sparkling tears fell, dripping onto the flag of Kultiras, and blossomed into blossoms. For a long time. For a long time. Jaina's shoulders stopped trembling. Father. How did he die? It's Archimonde. A female voice interrupted. It was only at this moment that Jaina noticed that the woman she had once found an eyesore and hated, her father's lover, Jaina Goldsword, was sitting not far away. Jaina bit her lip hard, and red blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. Continue. A week ago, Daylin and I, along with Kultira's first fleet, were on the opposite side of the North Stream coast. It was about 500 nautical miles away, and we were cleaning up the ghost ships floating on the sea full of undead. Then Archimonde suddenly appeared from the bottom of the sea. There were no signs at all. He was like a mountain rising from the bottom of the sea, and he directly cut the entire B squadron in half. Jaina Goldsword's face was also filled with unconcealable sorrow. As she spoke, there was even a priest treating a terrible wound on her abdomen. Daylin tried to rush over and delay Archimonde so that more people could escape, but Archimonde just pointed his finger, and a black light shot out from his hand and hit Daylin. What were you doing? Jaina was furious. Duque stopped her and shook his head. Chapter 875. Lady Goldensword has done her best. Miraculously, Duque's words appeased Jaina, who was about to go berserk. Jaina was silent, but her tears flowed down her face like a dam that had collapsed. Jaina Goldensword continued. Archimonde seemed to be venting. After destroying every living creature in his field of vision, he sank to the bottom of the sea again. He may have gone west, or south. When I woke up, it was the second squadron of the first fleet that saved me. Next, it was another General Kultiras who narrated. For some reason, Kultiras had also been attacked. However, this time it was not the Scourge, but tens of thousands of powerful Naga. Unlike the Naga under Duque, this batch of Naga was ink black in color. Their eyes are blood red, just like those berserk orcs. The survivors seem to have heard that the leader of the Naga was called Vasht. Vasht? Duque blurted out. You know? Jaina grabbed Duque's sleeve almost instantly. Duque smiled bitterly. That's an even more powerful Naga clan in the depths of the Endless Sea. The Furious Scale clan under me can't even compare to the patrols of the Vasht clan. Jaina did not speak, but she deeply imprinted the name Vasht in her heart. The general continued, the island of Kultiras has been destroyed. His Highness Thenred led the Imperial Guards to launch a desperate charge against Vasht, but was shot to death on the dock on the spot. Many survivors saw it, and the young Highness' ship was destroyed. No one would have thought that Kultiras would be destroyed almost overnight, and the main bloodline would be wiped out. Jaina Goldensword gritted her teeth. Kultiras has been destroyed, but Kultiras is not the first country to be destroyed, and it will probably not be the last. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, the heavy responsibility of restoring the country now falls on your shoulders. Your Highness, please ascend the throne as soon as possible and restore Kultiras. In response to her words, the civil and military officials of Kultiras all knelt down. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, please ascend the throne. Jaina was silent for a good 5 seconds. She glanced at Duque and wiped the tears off her face. Enthronement? I will. This is my responsibility as Proudmoore's son. But now, please leave. I want to be alone with my father. Observing a moment of silence for the ancestors was the right thing to do. A group of generals filed out. Just as Duque was about to step out of the church, Jaina's voice floated from behind him. Duque, give me some time. Maybe 1 or 2 days. I'll leave Theramore and the tribe to you. After saying that, a magic transmitter was tossed into Duque's hand. This was the communicator given to Sal. Duque said solemnly, "Leave it to me." Closing the door, Duque raised his head and looked at the clear sky. There was a trace of melancholy in his heart. The thread of fate had clearly seemed to have returned, but something like this happened at a time when he didn't expect it to. He didn't know if fate had been messed up by him, or if fate itself didn't listen to him and changed the direction of the future. In his memory, although Prince Tandred wasn't very capable, after Dalen's death, he managed the half-dead Kul Tiras with fear and trepidation. He should have lived for a few decades. But now, Tandred was dead. Jaina, who had been the uncrowned queen of Theramore, had been homeless for the rest of her life. But now, she was about to become the queen of Kul Tiras. It could only be said that fate was a strange thing. Duque suddenly realized that if he blindly looked at the future according to the original history, he would probably fail miserably. It seemed like there was no need to wait for the tribe to die. The death of a king was definitely a major event. Jaina could immerse herself in sorrow, but Duque couldn't. Time passed quickly as the fleet was reorganized and the wounded were treated. The next morning, the communicator that was given to Sal suddenly began to flash red. Duque gently clenched it, and an extremely clear spatial coordinate appeared in Duque's mind. Something happened to Sal. In Grey Valley, Wajin and Sal stayed together. Sal held the communicator in his wide palm. Sal said in a deep voice, "Wajin, I still don't think it's a good idea to attract humans. We have never been allies with the Alliance, not in the past, and it will be difficult to be in the future. I don't think humans will face this crisis with us. Jaina's group might choose to give up Theramore and go a little further south." Wajin sighed. He touched his long troll fangs. "We have no choice. I don't have high hopes for that Jaina. Although she is a smart person, I always feel that she has a faint hostility towards our tribe. Of course, most alliances are like this. So, if we want to cooperate, we must find someone with greater wisdom." At this moment, Sal suddenly found that the space not far from him began to fluctuate violently. "Get out of the way." Varrock waved his hand, dispersing the nearby orc guards. "Be careful, it's not Jaina." Wajin could see at a glance that the level of spatial fluctuations was on a completely different level. Sal nervously clenched the hammer of destruction in his hand. At the same time, Rexer beside him also clenched his twin axes. In the next second, a figure that Sal and Rexer were very familiar with appeared in front of them. Seeing Sal's expression, Wajin subconsciously felt that things seemed to be a little delicate. "Why is it you?" Sal murmured. "Why can't it be me?" Duque said calmly. "Really? That's how I should say it, I'm really flattered." Sal immediately smiled bitterly. "He is." Wajin was puzzled. The Alliance's supreme leader, the Alliance's commander-in-chief, Duke Marcus. Rexer said, enunciating each word. Wajin was greatly surprised. Duque actually came in person. Why is this happening? The Alliance has suffered a heavy blow again. Not long ago, His Majesty Dalen Proudmoore passed away. Her Highness Jaina has to deal with the aftermath. It seemed like a light sentence, but it did not make Sal feel happy because of the damage the Alliance had suffered. Instead, it made Sal's heart even more heavy. That powerful alliance, the alliance that defeated the previously incomparably powerful tribes, actually collapsed to this point. Even a monster like Duque could not stop the collapse of the situation. How terrifying was the Scourge army! Sal's heart trembled. Chapter 876. Sal's performance made Wajin extremely worried. Indeed, Sal was very talented as a leader. Before the talent was transformed into an ability, it was just an ability that had not yet been fulfilled. If the commander of the Alliance was not this powerful young mage who claimed to be 29 years old but looked like an 18-year-old, perhaps Sal would have enough room and time to grow. However, looking at Duque, Wajin instantly felt the gap between the two leaders of the Alliance and the Horde. Whether it was personal strength, charm, courage, or temperament, Duque was 9 streets ahead of the 15-year-old Sal. Not every leader had the courage to come alone to the middle of what was once the enemy's formation. After all, they were once enemies, and anything could happen. Duke showed up, showing off his courage and insight without any scruples, as well as the strong magical aura around him that was like the sun. If it were an ordinary high elf mage, Wuxia would have at least 70% confidence in killing him with his whirlwind blade that had been strengthened by troll witchcraft. Duke, from the moment he appeared, Wuxia had an intuition that not only he and Sal, but all the orc guards around them were locked by some unknown mysterious power. As long as they acted rashly, what awaited them would be a thunderous blow that would kill them. This was not an illusion. Rexer seemed to be staring at the side, but his forehead was sweating. Varrock and Brock were both unusually nervous. Only Sal, his intuition sensed something else. Duque had no malicious intentions, at least not now, and Duque had a way to solve the problem. He still remembered what Orgrim had said before his death: Duke Marcus is the most terrifying enemy. You will never know whether or not you are dancing in the palm of his hand, even if you plan a 2-step, 3-step, or even 10-step scheme. Orgrim also said, but he is also a kind and abides by a certain creed. At that time, Sal asked why he said that. Orgrim replied, I am, or at least alive. That is an example. He had 1,000 ways to kill me and Rexer after I was captured. But he gave up. So, if I had a choice, would want to be friends with him, not enemies. Thinking of this, Sal's heart quickly calmed down. His performance made Woking secretly happy. Duque glanced at Sal and said, Don't worry. The Burning Legion that once dominated you beast men, their commander Archimond is on the way to Kalimdor. On behalf of the Alliance, I can promise the Horde that before we kill Archerons, the Alliance will not take the initiative to declare war on the Horde. For some reason, even though he didn't want to show it, the moment Duque made the promise, not only Thrall, but the powerhouses like Wuxia, Rexer, Brock, and Varric all heaved a sigh of relief. Sal said, All right, for the sake of a common enemy. During this period of time, the Horde wouldn't start a war with the Alliance. Duke Marcus, you have the promise of the current tribal chief. A huge green fist gently bumped into a seemingly small human male fist in midair. Sal turned his head. All right, now let's discuss this. He can't be considered our common enemy. Duque refuted Sal and looked at the huge remains at the scene. It could be seen that this was a very powerful creature when it was alive. His upper body was like a night elf, but his lower body was like a stag. He was more than 3 meters tall and was supported by 4 hoofed legs. His turbid eyes were golden, and his moss-like long hair fell straight to his shoulders. There were leaves and twigs on his hair and beard. There were also 2 large and prominent antlers on his head, which made his more than 3 meters tall body even taller. But he was now dead. The clear axe marks on his body and the ominous energy that was full of a crazy bloody aura around the wound told everyone who the murderer was. Grom Hell's roar. Who is he? Sal asked a question he had wanted to ask for a long time. Beast men were typical outsiders, and it was Wuxia's first time coming to Kalimdor. As for the history of Kalimdor, the Horde could only be confused. Duque sighed. What if I told you that Grom, who had fallen into a state of madness, actually killed Cenarius, the forest demigod worshipped by the night elves and many Tauren druids? What would you do? Sal took a deep breath. He could not imagine how the Horde's new friends, the Tauren race, would treat them. Cenarius, the demigod, had lived since the ancient times, and since the beginning of the ancient war, he had been working hard to restore the damage to the earth. He constantly used his demigod power to create forests and amber, and was also the nature demigod worshipped by the night elves and Tauren. 10,000 years ago, when the high elves of Azhara opened the gate to Azeroth for the Burning Legion, Cenarius gathered the ancient guardian wild boar Igamagan, the bear brothers Uzer and Yusak, the white deer Malorn, the storm crow Arvina and other immortals to fight against the Burning Legion's Doom Guards, Demon Guards and Eridar wizards. Most of the ancient guardians died, and Cenarius survived under the protection of his father, the white deer. However, he was targeted by the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, who wanted to take revenge on Cenarius for the failure of the first invasion. so he died. More accurately, he died because of the demon's schemes. The orcs' need to build houses and cities led to the orcs cutting trees in the mountains, which easily angered the night elves. The night elves used their unparalleled forest warfare to force the warsong orcs into a corner. At this time, Manoroth only needed to secretly lead the orcs to a spring that had dripped a drop of his high-tier demon blood. In order to survive, Grom and his tribesmen easily drank the demon blood again and became berserk fell orcs. Then, the tragedy happened naturally. Sal could totally imagine how angry and crazy the night elves would be when their demigod was killed. Even if the night elves were as strong as the high elves, their counterattack was not something that the tribe with only 100,000 people could withstand. At this time, an ethereal voice that Duque did not expect sounded in the air. "Young chief, don't worry too much. As long as you can find the real murderer, the Lord of the Abyss Manoroth, and kill him, the night elves will forgive you. Moreover, all of your races now have a bigger and more terrifying common enemy, the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde." Sal and Duque were speechless at the same time. Prophet Medivh. Chapter 877. Life with cheats was so empty, lonely, and cold. Of course. Duque was speechless as he looked at the guy in front of him who was wearing a big brown cloak. His name was Mysterious Prophet X, which was also known as Medivh. Damn it. He was so used to being a charlatan that he almost forgot that there was an Azeroth charlatan, Medivh, here. Duque was also speechless about Medivh. Before the third battle of the Dark Portal, Medivh was a scam. Not only did he open the Dark Portal after being possessed, he even left a huge mess for the entire Alliance to deal with. However, before the third battle began, Medivh had predicted, or perhaps seen, the arrival of the Calamity Army. Regardless of whether he saw the incurable disease of the Rotterdam Kingdom or something else, he had informed several important people that the Rotterdam Kingdom was hopeless, and that they should escape if they didn't want to be on the sinking ship. In the Eastern Kingdom, he had at least perfectly convinced Thrall, who wanted to strategically evacuate from the Rotterdam Kingdom, and Jaina, who had nowhere to go. In this life, he had at least made the Iron Furnace Castle and Stormwind City more actively prepare for war. If they didn't prepare for war in advance, how could Stormwind City send troops to the South Sea city-state within a week? Don't even think about it. Even though Duque had promoted the development of a lot of advanced technology, such as railway transportation, it would take at least 2 weeks to gather the food needed for the army. However, since Medivh was such a charlatan, why didn't he think of a way to hide a few paladins in the Rotterdam Kingdom when the fool returned to the Rotterdam Kingdom? At that time, Second Fool had not completely fallen. With his half-baked Death Knight skills, if Uther, Mograine, Sidan, and the other macho men were all there, it would be a group of holy knights surrounding Arthas and using holy light, small hammers to hammer his chest. Even if the fool had F-cup chest muscles, he would still be hammered to an A-dash. On the other hand, Duque was convinced by Medivh's ability to persuade the night elves, orcs, and humans to join forces. The appearance of the Medivh stunned the people of the tribe. Then Sal took the lead. They all punched their chests and bowed. "Greetings, Prophet." Duque was speechless at the formality of their etiquette. It was understandable. To the tribe, Medivh was definitely a great benefactor. Without Medivh's reminder, the horde might not have risen up so quickly. If it was too late, the horde would have been devoured by the Calamity Army, or they would have been used as cannon fodder by the Alliance. The Orc Slave Legion would have been forced to fight against the sea of zombies. How could it compare to jumping out of the Alliance's traditional sphere of influence and opening a new city in a new continent? If the tribe was given a few more years to stabilize themselves, they would be able to compete with the Alliance. Duque was very unhappy about this. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. Medivh had such a heavy taste. Oh, it was universal love. He actually got together with the female orc, Garona, and even gave birth to a mixed-blood titan, orc, and human, Medivh. Duque was already giving him face by not calling Medivh a traitor. Alright, whether or not a traitor was a traitor would be up to the later generations of historians to judge. Duque couldn't care less. He couldn't split the Burning Legion when they were facing a great enemy. Seeing Medivh, Duque also bowed. Ah. Duque. Seeing you again, I'm sure both of us have complicated feelings. Medivh sighed. Once upon a time, Duque was just a small magic apprentice. He had outstanding talent, but was very far from the Breaking Dawn level. Duque was so close to becoming Medivh's disciple. Although he didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. The last time they met, he was already on the verge of death. Apart from some important instructions, he didn't say anything else. Who knew that after 15 years, the brat from back then would become the pillar of the alliance today? Medivh walked over and sighed again. Duque, you did well. I'm very pleased. If the alliance didn't have you, the situation would be 100 times worse. But I think that since you sent an emissary to warn the Night Elves, you should agree with my plan to unite the Night Elves, the alliance, and the Horde to deal with the most powerful and terrifying enemy, the Archerons. Duque shrugged. With you there, I feel that sending Ronan was unnecessary. Medivh shook his head. No, with the alliance's emissary as proof, as well as the magic fragments you sent Ronan. I managed to convince Tyron 3 days faster than I expected. With the Burning Legion able to reach Kalimdor at any time, even an hour is precious, let alone a day. But even if the Night Elves don't pursue the matter of Grom killing Cenarius, the Horde won't abandon our compatriots. Sar's words were immediately echoed by the other beastmen. Yes. We beastmen won't abandon any of our compatriots. Lexa raised his axe. We won't sit by and watch as the Warsong tribe is destroyed, Varrock replied. Is there no way to save Grom? Brock and the other beastmen shouted. Medivh frowned. I can teach you a magic formation that can purify the demon blood in the Warsong beastmen. But I've already lost most of my magic, so... Duque took the initiative. I'll set up the magic formation. Then what? Medivh looked at Sar, Duque, and the others. We have to make sure that Grom isn't injured as much as possible, and it's best if he's conscious when he enters the magic formation. The more heavily injured he is, or if he's unconscious, the weaker his willpower will be. The more corrosive the demon blood will be to his soul and body. After all, this isn't the first time he's drunk demon blood. If it gets worse this time, he'll never be able to get rid of the demon blood addiction. Sar and the others were suffering. Even though Grom Hellscream was a little old now, he was still the undisputed #1 warrior of the entire tribe. This wasn't a title he'd given himself, it was a battle record he'd earned. Along the way, Lexa, Varrock, Brock, and the others who didn't use pets were no match for Grom. As a hero of the older generation, Grom knew very well that a wise leader was needed to lead the tribe in times of crisis. Thus, he was like a door god, blocking all the beastmen's path of challenging Sar with Makra. He was so strong that Sar had originally prepared for a group of strong beastmen to knock Grom out with hammers and drag him back. Even so, there was only a 50% chance of success. No one knew how ferocious Grom would be after drinking the devil's blood again. Now he was saying that they couldn't knock him out or seriously injure him. What could they do? The beastmen were all dumbfounded. Let me go, Duque suddenly said. Chapter 878. The situation was very clear. It was not that the Horde would not act until they saw the rabbit, but that there was no way to deal with Manaroth. The orcs would always feel that someone was holding a dagger to their carotid artery. This was the second time that the orcs had been tricked into drinking demon blood. Moreover, Manaroth was the vanguard of the Burning Legion. If he was not dealt with, the army could not be assembled at all. Since they were going to save Lord Howl Grom anyway, it was better for Duque to be generous and let him handle it. As for the magic circle, the Horde was confused. At this point in time, the Horde had yet to establish contact with the shaman in their hometown. Even Sal himself was just a standard warrior, and he was not the powerful person who cultivated both magic and martial arts in the future. Duque easily found a magic node in Grey Valley, which was a moon well. He then released dozens of hands of magic and set up a dazzling magic circle. Seeing this scene, the horde fell into silence. Wujin gently encouraged Sal, "Don't be discouraged. The lifespan of humans is short, and a monstrous talent like Duke might not appear in 1,000 years." In other words, Sal was younger. At most, he could wait until Duke died, then Sal would be able to make a name for himself. The alliance is too strong. The rise of the horde depends on your decision, young chief. Sal nodded heavily. 50 meters away, a cross-shaped vein appeared on Duke's forehead. Although they were far apart, and Wujin deliberately spoke in the troll language that Sal could understand, the system elves' wide listening range and the ferocity of the translation software were too much for him to handle. "Hey! If I say that I'm immortal if I don't die at the hands of the demon, will your horde collectively jump into the sea and commit suicide?" "Yes, yes." Calm down, the magic circle did not require much effort. Rather than saying it was a magic circle, it was more like a simple exorcism circle. As long as there was enough Stratholme holy water and moon well, everything else was only auxiliary. The moon well was a good thing. As the name suggested, the moon well was inextricably linked to the well of eternity. It turned out that after the well of eternity exploded 10,000 years ago, the energy of the well water formed the Azeroth magic web that we are familiar with today, while some other scattered energy was scattered all over the world. Hence, the Night Elves rebuilt the scattered energy into the moon well to serve the Night Elves. Legend had it that the moon goddess slept in the well of eternity during the day. The Night Elves believed in the moon goddess, so they named the wells created by the scattered energy of the well of eternity as moon wells. As the purest energy liquid, as long as the moon well wasn't overly polluted, it would have a purifying effect. Duque still remembered the days when he used to purify devil cloth into moon cloth to earn some money in the game. Once everything was settled, Duque spent about an hour to catch up to Grom and his warsong beast men under the guidance of Lex's scouts. He dismounted from the wyvern and looked into the distance. They had just attacked a night elf base, and the fell orcs were wildly destroying it. Duke Marcus, seeing that, they will also be participating in the upcoming war against the Burning Legion. Please try not to hurt them. Lexa said in a low, muffled voice. You don't have to tell me, I will. Duque walked toward the camp filled with flames and blood without looking back. On the other side, kill. 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 Ow 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 ow, a dark green-skinned night elf hunter stared at the sky with grievances. She had died a long time ago. She and her compatriots had died here after failing to fend off the fell orcs with all their might. However, the fell orcs controlled by the devil's blood did not let them go. Even in death, the fell orcs continued to attack the corpses as if they were going to chop their corpses into pieces. Suddenly, the sky and earth darkened. A cold wind that seemed to come out of nowhere instantly extinguished the fire here, causing every fell orc to shiver. A huge illusion of Duque that was at least 15 meters tall appeared at the entrance of the camp. A voice amplified by magic rang out. Seeing the figure of the human mage with his cloak fluttering in the wind, almost every fell orc's scarlet pupils shrank. Especially Grom's hell scream. Duque's familiar and hated face easily evoked memories buried in his heart. Duque held his hands flat, palms facing up, looking like a clergyman ready to hug a lost sheep. Of course, in the eyes of the fell orcs, this was an extremely disgusting scene. Duque spoke, and with every sentence, his huge illusion took a step forward. Who is it? Who foiled the Horde's plot to occupy Azeroth? Who is it? Let millions of Horde die in battle in another world, become bait in the sea, become rotten meat on the yellow soil? Who is it? Defeated the great chief Orgrim in your hearts and turned him into a prisoner? Who is it? You were trapped in the wilderness for 13 years and lived a miserable life, living in fear every single day? Who else? Let hundreds of thousands of your compatriots become slaves. Let the next generation of beast men grow up in a cage. 5 questions, one sharper and more provocative than the last. Not to mention Grom's hellscream and his warsong fell orcs in the camp, even Rexer, who was watching this scene from afar, could not help but tremble with anger. Sure enough, in the next moment, Duque announced the answer himself. The one who defeated the horde was me. The one who made millions of horde warriors die in battle was me. The one who dealt with your former great chief Orgrim was me. The one who made you unable to own any land and could only live in pain every day in fear of being besieged was me. The one who made the former warriors become human slaves was still me. At this point, the huge illusion of Duque showed an extremely evil smile that absolutely deserved a beating. Who am I? Am I not the great enemy of your horde, Duke Marcus? Rexer, who was far away, knew that this was a type of provocation. He knew that Duque was now an ally of the horde, but he just could not help but have the urge to hack Duque to death. If his clear-headed horde was like this, how could the fell orcs, who were a little too hot-headed, endure it? Duque's illusion arrogantly swept his finger across the entire field. I am not targeting any of you. I am referring to all the fell orcs here. You are all trash, not satisfied? Come and bite me. Chapter 879. For a moment, Rexer's brain froze. In his impression, Duque was always so calm and collected, with the demeanor of a great general, a great commander. He always used light commands to send a large number of orcs to hell. Whether it was the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, or the recent battle of the Dalajan. Although the tribe had not figured it out before, how could they not think that Duque had deliberately given them heavy two-handed holy light weapons and dragged the tribe down with him? His ability to include enemies and enemies who were not his allies made the higher-ups of every tribe tremble in fear. That was why Rexer had always subconsciously thought that Duque was the kind of sinister pretty boy that the humans talked about. When had he ever seen a Storm Duke and the commander of the Alliance act like such a ruffian? On the other hand, even though he knew that everything Duque said was the truth, Rexer was still furious. He knew that Duque was helping the tribe to provoke him and taunt him. Moreover, it was a group taunt. Even if he was angry, he could only swallow it. The pain of being implicated made Rexer grit his teeth as if he had a toothache. Rexer and the clear-headed scouts were already so angry, let alone the half-crazed fell orcs. Duque was an enemy to begin with. Duque's words were also asking for a beating. Then what was there to think about? F***ck him. It was like a large bucket of ice water had been thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Including Grom, the fell orcs were completely enraged. A classic Loch Tar. The green tide formed by the fell orcs charged directly at the virtual image of Duque. Kill. 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 Tear him apart, kill Duke Marcus. The virtual image of Duque, who had just taunted them, turned around and ran without any heroic spirit. Running away after acting cool, how exciting. The scouts here had made a big mistake. There were not 5,000 fell orcs nearby, but nearly 10,000. Behind them were nearly 10,000 fell orcs with their weapons raised, madly chasing after Duque. In front of him was the incomparably bitter Rexer. Lexa had never imagined that the sound of close to 10,000 evil beast men roaring at the same time would be so shocking. It actually scared the wyverns so much that they flew into the sky and refused to come down. According to the original plan, they would sit on the wyverns and flee while letting Duque continue to release illusions to lure the violent guys on the ground. When Lexa finally managed to summon the wyvern, it was struck by Grom's flying axe, and there was nothing else to be done. The problem was that there were two pitiful figures leading a group of guards who had been driven out of the forest by the evil beast men. Woking. Thrall. Lexa's eyes almost popped out. He immediately understood that Sal and Woking were still worried and had secretly followed him. Lexa was just about to ask Duque to lead the fell orcs away, but Duque, that bastard, led all these fell orcs in Sal's direction. Even a young hero like Sal felt weak when he saw thousands of his fellow countrymen with red eyes and saliva dripping from between their fangs. They could not be killed or hit. As the saying goes, misfortune never comes alone. Suddenly, a rain of axes flew from behind. Unsurprisingly, the people were fine, but Sal's wolf and Woking's velociraptor fell at the same time. Lexa turned sideways and knocked away the flying axes that were thrown at him. Then he found that Duque was actually running elegantly while nimbly dodging all the flying axes. This movement was not at all like that of a weak mage. What are you looking at? Who said that mages can't exercise? Duque said righteously. You, can't you just lead the fell orcs into a trap? Why let everyone take the risk? Lexa instinctively protected his great chieftain. Hey! Sal, isn't that your compatriot behind you? I'm just here to help. Duque waved at Sal. You can't expect a human to wholeheartedly save your fellow orcs, can you? Lexa's eyes darkened and he almost fainted. Heavens! It took almost an hour for the wyvern to fly over. How long would it take to run back? The problem was that moon wells were not cabbages on the side of the road. According to Mediv, there were about 15 moon wells in the entire Kalimdor continent. The one in Grey Valley was already the closest. This distance was probably no less than 2 marathons of 80 kilometers. At this time, Sal had already run over to meet up with Duque. He gasped, Duke Marcus. Letting us run back like this, is this the plan of the highest intelligence commander of the Alliance? I'm afraid we'll be killed before we can run. Ring of ice. Duque snapped his fingers. A long wave of ice appeared out of thin air and pounced directly into the crowd of evil beasts behind them. The evil beast men behind them suddenly slowed down, and many evil beast men fell to the ground. At this time, the second wave of wyverns attempted to descend to meet Sal and the others. However, Grom did not go completely crazy. A few more flying axes scared the wyverns back into the sky. Duque shrugged. How about I teleport back first? I'll teleport back first, and you'll lead them into the trap. Sal was completely speechless. If Duque really left, what if the evil beast men did not chase after them? Gritting his teeth, Sal said in a deep voice, Sir Marcus, please do us this favor. The return tribe is willing to serve as the first line of defense in the upcoming battle at Mount Hygel. Duque said helplessly, okay. Then let's run together. Duque's performance completely subverted Sal and the others' understanding of mages. This guy who took off his mage robe while running and revealed a body of strong muscles, was he really one of those human potion pot mages? Sal couldn't help but ask, how did you train your muscles? Sigh. Duque showed an expression of infinite sorrow as he ran. That's a very, very long story. You just need to know that I trained these muscles to deal with 2 deadly fairies. That's enough. Huh? Sal's head was full of question marks. Duque looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, and tears seemed to be streaming down his cheeks. Once, when he patted Sasha's butt, Sasha would wonder, what are you doing? However, when he later patted Sasha's butt, she knew how to change positions, and the 2 fairies could not hold back. It was easier said than done to deal with 2 combat faction fairies. In addition to the wealth of knowledge from 10 terabytes of action movies, it was still that saying, to forge iron, one must be strong. In the past 10 years, Duque began a long journey of training. From a muscular otaku to a university animal, he trained into a bodybuilder. Do you think without a 6-pack, you can easily complete the 48 hands? So the 2 leaders of the Alliance and the tribe began to run toward the sunset. Ah! As if chasing after my lost youth. Chapter 880. Just like that, in the spirit of sharing weal and woe, the bosses of the Alliance and the Horde established a deep friendship in this unexpected ultramarathon for a reason that was not laughable. It would be strange. Yes, during the process, both sides exchanged friendly glances that were similar to, believe it or not, I'll get rid of you later. Of course, Thrall and the rest also called Duque a monster in their hearts. After all, it wasn't that Thrall had never seen what a human great wizard was like. At that time, when a morning star came to the arena, everyone stood up, with more than a dozen guards clearing the way, and knight followers at their side. Then, a middle-aged wizard in his 40s had to be supported up and down the stairs. When he got on a carriage, a servant had to kneel down and use his back as a stepping board, and then shakily get on. Most wizards were still young, but they were already holding a pot of medicine all day, like old men with one foot in the grave. When it came to Duque, the contrast was too great. Wasn't this the case? You're a respected Breaking Dawn wizard. Not only did you not bring your followers to a group of orcs, your endurance was even better than most of them. What the hell was this? No, this had nothing to do with wizards. Looking at Duque's nimble steps that seemed to be dancing in the air, Thrall was certain that Duque had learned the Elven Ranger's ways. Sir Marcus, although I have no intention of prying into your secrets, your endurance, speed, and agility amaze me. Thrall still asked. Ah. It's nothing. When you have two women by your side who are the strongest rangers in the world, in order to prove that you are a man, you will practice such skills. Duque raised his head 60 degrees to the sky, and 2 lines of illusory tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. Almost immediately, Thrall felt that Duque was a man with a story. Ah. That was a sweet nightmare that had lasted for 10 years. The past was unbearable. Duque's gaze seemed to have traveled through time and space, returning to the past. Honey, do sit-ups. I'll kiss you every time you come up. Aurelia gently pressed her knees against Duque's feet. Because she was holding Duque's ankles lightly, every time Duque got up, he could see Aurelia's sweet smile, kisses, and the pair of high-jewel peaks that didn't match the style of the elves. Ha ha ha, come and chase me. As long as you catch up to me or run a kilometer, I'm willing to unlock it for you. New. Yes. Z. Force. Sasha ran in front of Duque with a bashful expression. She wore a thin veil and swayed her seductive figure in front of Duque. All kinds of, if you're a man, do whatever you want, drove Duque, this lazy worm who had no motivation in life, to work hard. Unknowingly, 10 years had passed. In reality, after the first year, Duke could already beat up the Windstalker sisters until they cried for their parents, screaming that they didn't want him anymore. But for some reason, with Aurelia and Sasha constantly changing the prizes, he persisted for 10 years. Although Duque showed off his affection and almost forced Gavin Rad to be a virgin to a 10-meter-tall virgin, Duque, things were different now. Without considering his profession skills, with just Duque's skills, he could definitely kick open the gate of Sarsgaard camp and shout in orc language, "I want to fight 10 of you." Then, he would clean up a circle of people and walk out safely. The long run would eventually come to an end. From morning to evening, after listening to Grom's roar for nearly 8 hours, after Duque, "I'll kill you," Shien finally lost his temper. Duque finally flipped out. In front of a huge well that emitted a blue glow, Duque stopped in his tracks. He ignored Sar and the others who had scattered to the side, ignored the nearly 10,000 evil orcs who were clamoring non-stop, and looked straight at the face of Grom Hellscream, whose mind was a little unclear. Duque arrogantly raised his left middle finger at Lord Howl with the international gesture. Well, actually, he was showing Lord Howl the ring on his finger with the Marcus family's emblem on it. Then, he hooked his right index finger. "Grom, didn't you want to kill me? Come on." In the wind, Duque's seemingly thin body seemed like it could be blown away. Coupled with the evil smile on his face, it looked like he was courting death. Sar had a feeling that Duque would succeed. Sure enough, after Duque's provocation, the tribe's #1 warrior, Grom Hellscream, roared and let out a thunderous roar. Then, he jumped high into the air. Leap slash. Grom had practiced and used a seemingly ordinary attack skill that exposed his own weakness no less than 1,000,000 times. After practicing it 1,000,000 times, even the most ordinary of moves would produce an unimaginable sublimation. It was a move that surpassed a warrior's skills and violated most of the common sense of physics. When Grom's burly body jumped to the height of a 5-story building, his axe, which was glowing with a bloody light, suddenly began to accelerate unscientifically. If the initial momentum was like a meteor falling to the ground, then the second half was like crossing dozens of meters of space and arriving in the blink of an eye. Great Chief Sar could not imagine how Duque could survive this move. In previous sparring sessions, even if Grom held back, Sar could only strenuously block the hammer of destruction, and use his physical strength to withstand it. Because there was no way to dodge. What about Duque? Sar was in a daze for a moment. If Duque could not dodge, and Grom killed Duque with his axe, would he be able to help the tribe eliminate this enemy of the alliance? Unfortunately, Sar was destined to be disappointed. In a berserk state, Grom's attack speed and power increased exponentially, but his moves had too many flaws, and the direction and path of his attacks were extremely obvious. The moment he jumped, the system elf had already mapped out Grom's path of attack in Duke's mind. It had also calculated the damage and area of effect that would be caused when the axe smashed into the ground. Under the simulation of this supercomputer's tactical system, Grom's attack was more like a clown trying to make people laugh. Shrill and violent wind-breaking noises sounded. As expected, Grom's blood roar slammed into the ground, creating huge spiderweb-like cracks that would make anyone's heart tremble. Unfortunately, it didn't hit. Duke moved half a body away in an incomparably confident manner, seemingly dodging the attack by a hair's breadth. However, his mocking and extremely calm face was deeply imprinted in the hearts of Sar, Rexer, Wajin, Varrock, Brock, and the other powerful warriors of the tribe. Duque made his move. Chapter 881. As the number 1 warrior of the Horde, Grom's roar was extremely powerful when he was in a berserk state. It was an astonishing momentum that set off monstrous waves crashing against the greenish-black reefs on the coast. Even if the reefs in front of him seemed indestructible, there was a feeling that they could be destroyed in one blow. However, Duque was clearly a mage who had nothing to do with melee professions. Very suddenly, his every movement was like a powerful warrior who looked down on everyone. Everyone could predict that Duque's counterattack would come in the next moment. Like a seagull hunting for food in a storm, after dodging the powerful and crazy waves crashing against the shore, Duke's secretive, arrogant, confident, and elegant demeanor. In the eyes of 1,000 powerful fighters, 10,000 different flavors could be read. Sal was so shocked that he couldn't speak. So, this is the true appearance of the ultimate warrior who cultivates magic and martial arts in this world? Counterattack. It was about to come in the next moment. The long and huge blood howl slammed into the ground, and black sand suddenly rose into the air, as if even time had stopped. In that instant, Grom's terrifying attack, which seemed to be able to shatter a mountain, was smashed into smithereens by a seemingly slender arm. The jaws of every Horde member dropped to the ground. They felt the same way about the human male arm that was much thinner than a beastman's. It passed through Grom's blood-red light and pressed against his rough face. It was as if it was a gigantic iron hook instead of Duke's arm. Even with Wajin's sharp eyes and wisdom, he only saw the fact that Grom was caught, but he didn't see how Duque caught Grom. It was too shocking. Being able to press his hand on Grom's face meant that he could also kill Grom in one move. If they could dodge Grom's first attack perfectly, they could do it too. But Duque was a mage. Wajin felt like his mind was in a mess. Didn't that mean that Duke Marcus also had the strength of a hero in the field of melee combat? Wajin suddenly discovered something that warriors could not see. There was a faint magical light on the streamlined muscles of Duque's arm. The light formed lines, like some kind of exquisite inscription, branded on Duque's arm. Even Duque's robe could not completely conceal this layer of light. When Duque used his magic power, the magic elements in the air seemed to be divided into 12 strands, and they seemed to be pouring into Duque's arm at the same time. In the end, Wajin even felt that the magic elements were pushing Duque's arm toward Grom's big face. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Ha. Ha. The muscles in Duque's right arm expanded, and the strength of his legs, waist, and arms combined with his Breaking Dawn magic power pushed Grom, whose facial muscles were already distorted, more than 10 meters away. He heavily dragged a huge black mark on the ground, mixed with traces of blood. Then, when he hit the wall of the moon well, Duque used the momentum of the impact to lift Grom up, and then pressed his head into the crystal blue well water that was knee-deep. At the same time, the magic formation was completely activated. Countless rays of silver light surged from all directions, hovering above the moon well, and finally converging on Duque's arm. White light shone everywhere. Traces of blood energy began to dissipate in the air with a shrill cry. "Wake up! Idiot!" Gugugu, the #1 warrior of the tribe, struggled as the strengthened moon well water kept pouring into him. A few seconds later, the incomparably nervous thrall saw Grom's arms suddenly stop struggling. The great chief felt a heart-wrenching pain in his chest. Was that nervousness? Was that heartache? Thrall couldn't tell. Then, the group of orcs looked at Grom, who had his head buried in the well water, and suddenly pushed Duque's arm away. Duque bared his teeth, but still retreated while panting heavily. Everyone saw Grom sit up with a crash, and then give Duque a look of disgust. Thrall was not angry, but delighted. Grom? Grom looked at Thrall, Lexa, and the rest who were rushing towards him, and then at Duque, who was panting heavily by the well. How could the awakened Grom not know what had happened? Although he had fallen into madness and chaos not long ago, this did not mean that he had completely lost his memories. Thinking about how he had drunk the demon's blood to survive, and how he had fallen even deeper into madness after killing the nature element demigod, Grom's expression was very interesting. He then thought about how the one who had pulled him out of the abyss of pain and madness was actually Duke Marcus, whom he had wanted to kill and dismember 10,000 times over for the past 10 years. Grom's expression became even more interesting. It was a boundless sense of shame that made him want to chop himself on the head, and then fall into a mass grave to die a clean death. No, no. My ancestor. Grom, a man of steel who would not shed a single tear even if his parents died, his brothers all died, and he was slashed hundreds of times, suddenly burst into tears. Thrall finally rushed over and hugged the bawling Grom tightly. He patted his broad back and said, "It's okay now. Grom." "It's okay." Grom did not seem to notice Thrall hugging him. Instead, he stared at Duque, who was sitting on the wall of the well and smiling mysteriously at him. Duke Marcus. Why did you save me?" If it had been any other strong person in the tribe who had saved him, Grom would not have been so annoyed. But Duque. Only Duque. He could not accept it at all. "Why? You ask me why?" Duque spread his hands, his face full of ridicule. "One of the most powerful demons in the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is on the way to Kalimdor. This is not an opponent that the Alliance can deal with alone. And your chief insisted that he would not join this temporary alliance against the Burning Legion unless he saved you. If you have to thank someone, thank Thrall." Grom was silent. Anyone would think that he was a volcano that was about to erupt. "Calm down, Grom. At least at this time, Duque and the Alliance are indispensable allies for us. If the world of Azeroth is destroyed, we won't gain anything," Thrall said anxiously. Chapter 882. Grom calmly pushed Thrall away with his immense strength. Lying in the clear moon well water, Grom stood in front of Duque, clenched his teeth, and finally said, "I may have fallen into madness, but I remember everything clearly. You could have used underhanded methods against me, but you chose the most honorable method. I don't want to admit it, but I have to admit that I owe you a favor." Duke leisurely crossed his legs, let out a chuckle, and then replied, "Favor? Very good. I need a powerful vanguard cannon fodder in the upcoming Battle of Mount Hyjal. Live until then. As long as Archimonde is dead, I don't care if you live or die. Your favor will be repaid." "Okay." Grom's swollen muscles seemed to have calmed down and retracted, but everyone knew that Grom Hellscream had made a vow as a man. Thrall's body trembled. Then, he walked over and bowed to Duque with Wajin and the rest of the Horde's higher-ups. "Duke Marcus, no matter what the grievances between the Alliance and the Horde are, at least this time, we are grateful to you. You are a true gentleman outside of the battlefield." In the system notification, Duque's eyes widened as he saw that his reputation in Orgrimmar had become respect. Damn, I, a human, actually got the respect of the Horde's main city. Could there be anything more illogical? Duque felt a little awkward. He coughed lightly and changed the topic. Quickly take care of Manaroth. We'll meet up with the Night Elves representative and discuss how to deal with Archimonde. With that, Duque turned and left. On the other side, Grom roared with his famous lung capacity, "You bunch of idiots, are you done being crazy? If you are, come over and drink the water from the moon well. The Horde needs you to be clear-headed." The Warsong orcs, who had just recovered from the shock of the magic formation but were still not fully awake, were obedient like grandsons under the command of their chief. They eagerly came over to drink Grom's bathwater. To be precise, it was the water from the moon well after someone fell down. Of course, the orcs, who were never particular about hygiene, didn't care about such details and drank it all the same. After living a barbaric life, every orc's stomach was like an incinerator. After everything was over, Duque and the tribe's experts gathered again. Thrall said, "I have obtained the guidance of the prophet. According to the curse left in Grom's body, we can trace it back to the source and find the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth. As long as we can kill him, the bloodthirsty curse that has plagued the orcs for a long time can be removed." At the mention of this brutal and crazy bloodthirsty curse, the expressions of almost every beastman of the older generation changed. The new generation of beastmen might not be able to understand it, but only the first batch of beastmen who had drunk the demon's blood would understand how terrifying the impulse to destroy and slaughter every night was. Destruction. Slaughter. Fresh blood. It was like a traveler dying of thirst in the desert, thirsting for water. Everything was so crazy, yet so natural. Grom had once thought that the ancient tree in front of him was Duque when he was half awake. He had used his fists and claws to smash the tree into pieces, even tearing out the roots and using his fangs to bite them off. Yes, in the illusion, he had bitten off Duque's neck. However, Duque was standing in front of him. He knew that he shouldn't attack Duque, and this human with a faint, confident smile had done him a favor. Grom was extremely conflicted. However, he still had to do what he had to do. Moreover, he had to break the orc's fate of being controlled by the Burning Legion. After this incident and seeing his compatriots easily fall into madness under the influence of the demon's blood, Thrall clearly understood that he had to cut off the source of this curse. At this moment, Thrall, who was still in the whirlpool of fate, did not know that he was fated to lose Grom Hellhowl, the strongest of the Horde. "Let's go." Duque stood up, letting his blue and white cape flutter in the wind. The final result was very different from the original history. Worried about the curse's influence on the previous generation of orcs, not only did they not bring ordinary soldiers, but Varrock and Brock also stayed at the border between the Barren Lands and Grey Valley. The final members of the Abyssal Lord's team were Thrall, Grom, Duque, and Wajin. Grom gripped the blood curse sensor that Medivh had given him. In his field of vision, everything changed. The world turned black and white. Then, a wisp of bloody mist that should have been invisible to the naked eye floated toward him from afar like a thin silk veil. Finally, it connected to his chest. "Follow me." Grom carried Bloodhowl and strode towards the land of destiny. No matter how terrifying the demon lord was waiting for him, he knew that he had to go. That was his duty, Grom Hellhowl. It was also his destiny. Surprisingly, Manaroth's location was not too far from the entrance of Grey Valley, but it was very well hidden. Without Grom leading the way, perhaps even the local night elves would not know that there was a small valley between the mountain streams that was completely unaffected by the outside world. Less than 500 meters into the valley, the entire scenery changed. It was no longer lush and lush like in Grey Valley, full of birds and fragrant flowers. Instead, it was filled with the color of defeat. The entire sky suddenly turned from a sunny morning into a dark and gloomy midnight. Evidently, the evil magic of the Abyssal Lord was affecting the surrounding space. His eyes were filled with lava. Amidst the grayish-black volcanic ash, there were countless vague lava streams that flowed from top to bottom. High temperature. Their nostrils were filled with the sulfuric smell of the burning plains, and their feet were full of volcanic ash that squeaked when they stepped on it. Mixed with a large amount of evil magic, the fire elements rolled irregularly in the air, and the turbid smell was nauseating. Not to mention Thrall and Grom, who did not have very strong senses, even the extremely sensitive forest troll hero Wajin, and Duque, who had the help of the system elf, could not sense the existence of Manaroth. Suddenly, there was light in this blazing world. It was a terrifying sword light that seemed to be able to split the entire world in half. A double-headed greatsword more than 15 meters long broke out of the volcanic ash under their feet and easily attacked Wajin and Duque at the back of the team. Wajin was seriously injured in just one move. Chapter 883. Woking had never been a flimsy man. The troll looked thin, but that was purely because of his body proportions. Even though he looked thin, Wajin's arms were still thicker than Duque's thighs. Wajin, who was 2.3 meters tall, was half a body taller than Duque, who had grown to 1.83 meters in the void, perhaps because he ate something wrong. Despite being an agility-type hero, Wajin was still hit by the terrifying greatsword. If Wajin had not used his signature long rod and spinning blade to block the attack, no matter how strong the troll's regeneration was, he wouldn't have been able to save him. Like a cannonball, Wajin was sent flying 100 meters away and directly left the stage. Originally, the trajectory of the cold crescent sword light from Manarotha's giant sword had also covered Duque. However, the Lord of the Abyss did not expect that Duque, who should not have been able to react in time, would not have used flash or ice block to save his life. Instead, he leaned back as far as he could and got into an iron plank position to avoid this fatal attack. This gave Duque precious time to counterattack. Behind, following Duque's roar, Thrall and Grom, who were the vanguard, immediately reacted. When they turned around, they saw Duque throw out a gorgeous magic brilliance like a waterfall and hit the Lord of the Abyss. It was like a waterfall from the ground to the sky. The dazzling golden flame shockwave was mixed with the holy light that should not belong to a mage. However, it was not enough. After the huge double-headed greatsword failed to cut Duque, under the control of the huge arm filled with explosive power, it spun around and stabbed into the ground. A scarlet shockwave exploded in front of the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. Completely unable to withstand it, Duque could only flash and retreat to Grom's side. At this moment, Manaroth, who had crawled out of the ground, showed his terrifying figure. The history books described the Lords of the Abyss as an outstanding power that could destroy all life. These huge, dragon-like fellows with a pair of repulsive wings came from the netherworld, the farthest corner of the universe. As for Manaroth, he was the cream of the crop. His entire body felt extremely bloated, and his lower body was more like a pot-bellied four-legged lizard. From the tip of his stomach to the tip of his tail, he was at least 20 meters long. His upper body was full of fat, and he looked like a human fatty. There was a huge armor that looked like a kite shield hanging from his belly button. His upper body was bare, but he wore 2 shoulder pads that were full of sharp spikes. He had a pair of huge curved horns that looked like mammoths and a big mouth full of fangs, which made him look extremely ferocious. The Abyss Lord looked at the young Sal and let out a chilling laugh. He. Sal, I knew you would come. I also saw that you brought the powerful Hellscream with you. His blood belongs to me. So does your entire pitiful race. The only thing I didn't expect was that you would bring the Burning Legion's biggest problem in Azeroth, Duke Marcus. Very good. You're really good. Green saliva dripped down from the intersecting fangs. When the saliva dripped onto the volcanic ash, it actually made a creaking sound similar to acid corroding the ground. Sal couldn't help but narrow his eyes. This young chief of the Horde suddenly took a step forward and slammed the famous hammer of destruction on the ground. Bang! Sand and stones flew everywhere. This wasn't a meaningless venting. This was the beastmen's favorite way to boost their spirits. After roaring, Sal shouted, Duque. I'll go first. Duque replied in a low voice, I'll cover. This was the first real cooperation between the two leaders of the Alliance and the Horde. Last time when the Dalajan besieged Arthes, Sal, who lacked a proper weapon, was more of a bystander. However, this time, the cooperation between the two was as seamless as if they had worked together thousands of times before. 1,024 hands of magic appeared in the air in an instant. The sudden burst of icy arrow rain made the temperature of the entire world suddenly drop by more than 20 degrees, from the hot midsummer into the biting cold winter. Thrall swung the hammer of destruction, like a meteor hammer when the ice crystals pierced through the void and stabbed into the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. The large square-headed hammer that was larger than a human head began to bloom with a dazzling light. A moment ago, it was just like the light of a lighthouse in the night, and the next second, it was already a small sun full of destructive power. The air in the lungs was compressed by the strong muscles, as if every milliliter of air was converted into oxygen to support the next blow. Sal used all his strength to throw the hammer of destruction. Just as the Lord of the Abyss was busy defending against Duke's breaking dawn magic, the hammer of destruction arrived before he could recover. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion. Even with Manarotha's huge body, the powerful destructive power of the hammer of destruction still forced him to take 3 big steps back. Unfortunately, even with the full power of the hammer of destruction, it still could not break the defense of the thick hide of the Lord of the Abyss. Ha 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 ha. Manaroth laughed wildly. Although it's a good effort, unfortunately, it's meaningless. The next moment, the huge Lord of the Abyss charged over faster and fiercer than a rhinoceros. Boom! The double-headed giant sword emitting an evil aura easily smashed the limestone ground the size of a basketball court into pieces. The powerful shockwave sent Sal flying, who had clearly dodged the attack, and Duque had to flash dozens of meters away again. The powerful shockwave also flipped Grom over. Manarotha's huge body stood in front of Grom Hellscream and laughed sinisterly. That child Sal believes that you will definitely be saved. But he does not know what is burning in the depths of your soul. When that thing is in your heart, you will know that we are actually all the same. The murmur burrowed deep into Grom's chest, pierced his heart, and plucked at the weakest chord in his soul. It was a string that could easily cause him to fall into madness and slaughter with just a slight tug. His soul was falling. His soul was falling. He found that his body and soul seemed to be enjoying this desperate, painful, and sweet madness. No. Grom let out a roar that sounded like it came from hell. Chapter 884. Beastmen will never be slaves. The deafening roar resounded through the entire Grey Valley, sending all the rocks that were still unstable in the surroundings flying. Grom started sprinting at high speed. The anger pumped out of his heart burned through his entire body. The anger that had accumulated in his chest needed a place to vent. The unyielding will hidden in the depths of his soul drove him. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, his well-trained sense of distance told him that it was enough. He stomped hard on the ground with his left leg, and his burly green body soared into the sky with an aura that defied gravity. The blood roar that was held high gave people the illusion that it was going to burst through the gray sky. That was not his attack alone. That was the beastman's struggle against fate. That was the race's endless desire for the future. He waved his hands, and the axe flew up. The blood moon rose, and the axe flashed. From the battle against Galan in the mountains of Draenor to the Blood War Alliance in the vast lands of Azeroth, Grom Hellhowl had traversed hundreds of thousands of miles between 2 worlds and 3 lands with Bloodhowl. He had never feared anyone. One axe to split the world, who did not recognize him? The curved axe light. At first, it looked like a blood moon, but it suddenly became a rainbow that traversed space and time. Everyone could see that the axe did not change, and everyone could see the trajectory of the axe. But even though they could see it, they could not block it. The Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, was not a light human or elf. He was a huge demon that weighed more than 10 tons. From the start, he had felt that something was wrong. As the loyal dog of the Arkherons and the vanguard of the Burning Legion, he had destroyed countless planets and destroyed countless races that he saw as inferior. He had traversed the universe for 3,000 years, but he had never seen such a brilliant axe light. Manoroth did not know how much damage he would suffer if he was hit by Grom's axe. He did not dare to imagine it. He roared and swung his huge double-headed sword at the sky. Cleaving Grom in half in midair was his only chance. But the terrifying brilliance of the sword only flashed for a moment before it missed. At that moment, he realized that Duque had used an inconspicuous Radiant Moon arcane missile that contained Breaking Dawn magic power to hit the edge of the blade. It was a hair's breadth away. The error was 1,000 miles. The Lord of the Abyss's sword narrowly missed Grom's side. He swung at empty air. The next moment, the blood-red axe light flashed and disappeared. She slashed at his chest with all her might. Every ounce of Grom's strength, every drop of his fury, as a warrior, was poured into this strike. Moreover, the blade of this terrifyingly powerful legendary weapon had perfectly struck the only weakness on the Lord of the Abyss chest. It wasn't supposed to be a weakness. After being hit by the semi-artifact, Hammer of Destruction, it became a weak point. Sal's previous desperate attack was not meaningless. Impossible. The gigantic Lord of the Abyss let out the last painful roar of his life. The violent demonic power contained in his body began to erupt uncontrollably. It was as if a nuclear explosion had occurred. It symbolized complete destruction. It symbolized inevitable death. Thrall, who had just regained his senses, did not even have the time to stand up. He could only watch helplessly as Grom Hellhole, who was both a teacher and a friend, a subordinate, but more like a guardian god, roared and was engulfed by the destructive light of the Abyssal Lord's final self-destruction before his death. Grom, who had just attacked with all his strength, could not escape in time. No, Sal had just gotten up when he was thrown back by the explosion's shockwave. The back of his head hit the rock behind him again. The light was too intense. His eardrums were numb from the shockwave of the explosion. His ears were ringing. No. No. No, Sal struggled again. He used his hands and feet to half-crawl and half-leap to the place where Grom had been swallowed by the explosion. But, all he saw were a few broken and deformed pieces of armor. Sal's heart instantly sank into a bottomless abyss. He suddenly felt very cold and lonely. That's right. He had great ambitions. He wanted to bring the suffering orcs out of the quagmire of pain and tragedy. But he was too young. Even if he did not want to admit it, he still yearned to learn more from the older heroes. He instinctively chased after the figures of Orgrim and Grom. He had never said it out loud, but he really admired them. Now, Orgrim had died tragically under Arthas, Frostmourne. Now it was Grom's turn. He had sworn that he would never cry again. Because the orcs had shed enough tears. At this moment, Sal could not help but kneel down and howl at the sky. No, Grom. No, originally, this should have been an incomparably sorrowful scene. Unfortunately, a coarse voice that was barely breathing interrupted this scene. Brat, I'm not dead yet. What are you screaming for? Sal almost doubted his ears. His thick neck was like a rusty axle, making creaking sounds. He could not turn for a long time. He did not dare to believe his own senses. But there was indeed an orc panting heavily behind him. With the hope of climbing out of the abyss of despair, Sal finally turned his body step by step and saw the two figures that almost overlapped with each other more than 10 meters behind him. He could not believe it. It was actually Duque supporting Grom Hellscream, who was more than one size bigger than him. The Warsong chief was in an extremely sorry state. His left hand was unnaturally bent, and the green skin of his entire front half was slowly charred black. But, he had survived after all. Grom, Duque? Sal was so excited that he was a little incoherent. He could not imagine that at the most critical moment, it was Duque, who was originally his mortal enemy, who saved one of his two most admired idols, Hellscream. At this moment, Duke shouted, "You're so heavy." He threw Grom to the ground like a piece of trash, a look of disdain on his face. How long has it been since you last bathed? Looking at the cursing Duque, Grom, who was lying on the ground, laughed. For your sake, I'll learn to bathe like you humans every day if I have the chance. After laughing with great difficulty, Lord Howl's face suddenly darkened. He was indignant. I seem to owe you a life this time. Duque patted the dust off his body and looked at Manarotha's mountainous corpse. You can return it to me on Mount Hyjal, he said calmly. This was not being polite. In the latest intelligence, Duque saw a name that should not have appeared in the historical battle of Mount Hyjal, Demon Lord Kazak. Chapter 885. Duque was not sure if Kazak's soul had completely entered the world of Azeroth. If he was like Archimonde, with both his soul and body in this world, then there would be a chance to get rid of the two great demons once and for all. Of course, on the other hand, this also meant a lot of pressure. According to the original history, there were a total of 5 bosses in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, including Archimonde. Even an orc hero with the best stamina would not be able to take it, let alone a human hero with even worse stamina. Duque really did not want this change in history. He could successfully get rid of Kazak last time because Duque had the support of the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza. This time, the dragons were obviously premeditated by the Burning Legion. If he really wanted to get rid of Archimonde like in history and let Archimonde's grave next year, Duque would have to put in more effort. Saving Grom Hellscream was Duque's first step. For someone like Lord Howl to die in the hands of a mere Lord of the Abyss, it would be a waste of his talent. If he were to die, he should at least die in the hands of a great demon like the Burning Legion's leader. Yes, first get rid of Archimonde. It would be best if Lord Howl, Thrall, or something perished together with Archimonde, ending the alliance and horde disputes for who knows how many years. That would be perfect. But he was afraid that fate would play tricks on him. Duque really did not dare to compliment the goddess of fate. If she was unhappy and slammed the table, saying, "Your alliance already has Lothar, the old bastard, and the horde needs an old scum or something," then Duque would be embarrassed. All right. First get rid of Archimonde, then leave the rest to fate. Back to 2 weeks ago, on Mount Hyjal. More than 9,000 years ago, Illidan built a second well of eternity here for his own selfish desires. Later, the dragons that survived the cataclysm came to the home of the Night Elves. The red dragon Alexstrasza, the green dragon Isra, and the bronze dragon Nozdormu looked down at the peaceful home of the druids and the fruits grown by the Night Elves. The powerful druid Malfurion welcomed the dragons and told them about the new well of eternity. The dragons were shocked when they heard the terrible news. They thought that as long as the well of eternity existed, the Burning Legion would not give up the idea of conquering this world. Malfurion made a pact with the 3 dragons to ensure the safety of the well of eternity and to ensure that the minions of the Burning Legion would never find a way back to this world. The giver of life, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza, cast a magical acorn into the center of the well of eternity. As soon as the acorn came into contact with the magical lake water, it began to sprout and grow into a giant oak tree. The roots of the tree reached deep into the bottom of the lake, and the huge canopy almost covered the entire sky. This huge oak tree was the eternal symbol of the Night Elves' harmonious relationship with nature. The life energy it emitted could slowly spread and heal the wounds of the entire world. The Night Elves named their world tree, Nordrassil, which meant, crown of the sky, in the language of the Night Elves. After the 3 dragon aspects bestowed the holy blessing of the dragon race here, this place had always been regarded as the most sacred place by the Night Elves. For more than 9,000 years, this place had been guarded in the strictest manner, and the teachings of druids and other nature teachings had been spread here. 9,000 years of peace had passed just like that. On this day, this sacred place that had never been set foot on by creatures of other races for more than 9,000 years welcomed a strange team. As many as 24 elite guards escorted these few unshackled guests to the front of the temple of the moon goddess Elun. When the envoy, consisting of 2 humans and 2 high elves, arrived at the entrance of the temple, the 2 female temple guards sized them up. They were, of course, Ronan, Bridget, Lilith, and Riataline, who were here to send a warning to the night elves. They were also sizing up these night elven guards that had only existed in legends for thousands of years. They weren't wearing long robes, but were instead wearing shiny silver breastplates and pleated skirts. There was a pattern of a crescent moon in the middle of the breastplates. The moon goddess temple was filled with female priestesses. According to the introduction of the elven guard captain along the way, most of them could ride and shoot, and were proficient in tactics. For example, the leader of the night elves and the chosen of the moon goddess Alun, Tyrant Whisperwind, was an excellent archer. After the announcement, the guards signaled for Ronan and the rest to enter. Under the guidance of a priestess in a white robe and a team of 6 guards, Ronan entered the moon goddess temple. As soon as he walked in, Ronan felt the moonlight sprinkling on his body. It was gentle and comfortable, as if the moon goddess had stretched out her soft, motherly hand to caress him. The rectangular room was surrounded by tuberose, and there was a large stone tablet in the middle for the priestess to give a speech. The circular stone path leading to the stone tablet was carved with complicated patterns, all of which were pictures of the waxing and waning of the moon. As he walked along the winding corridor, he found that no matter where the moon was in the sky, the gentle moonlight would always illuminate the entire room. They came to a corner on the second floor that was half surrounded by vines, and the priestess leading the way said softly, "Please wait here." Ronan walked to the center of this small space, and after pacing for a while, he heard Bridget say, "You should sit down. It will help you calm down." Ronan sighed, and still sat on the stone bench that was probably used by the priestess. The surrounding environment made him feel much more at ease. However, after waiting for a while, he still grew impatient. He was even worried that Tyrant's leader would be unhappy that they had come so suddenly. However, Ronan, who had no experience as an emissary, could only continue to wait. Finally, an hour later, a tall and slender priestess wearing a moon-white robe with golden embroidery slowly walked into this small world. Night elves were blessed by the Lord of Time, Nozdormu, and had eternal life. As long as they lived through 100 years of infancy, their appearance and physique would be fixed at the perfect youth stage. In front of Ronan was a slender and graceful female elf. Her skin was smooth and delicate, and there was a faint purple tinge to it. Her strange blue hair had a few strands of silver in it, and her exquisite face was very feminine even in the eyes of humans and high elves. "Hello. I am Tyrant Whisperwind." The priestess spoke in ancient elven language. Chapter 886. Elven language was something that high-ranked human wizards could not avoid. Moreover, Duque had instructed Ronan to cram on the ancient elven language and etiquette for this trip. Be it the Dalajan or Stormwind City, these things were lacking. But this was not important, the high elves still had a lot of inheritances. Ronan performed an ancient ritual that he had practiced hundreds of times on the journey from the ship to Theramore and then to Azhara. "Greetings, Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind. I'm Ronan from the Eastern Kingdom on the other side of the Endless Ocean. I'm a messenger from an alliance of humans, high elves, dwarves, and pygmies. Greetings, Mr. Ronan." It could be seen that Tyrant was very satisfied with Ronan's practice of night elven etiquette. Regardless of orthodoxy or standards, for a temporary emissary to be able to practice to this extent showed that he had truly put in a lot of effort. Everything should have been perfect, and the host and guest should have enjoyed themselves. But in the next moment, Tyrant seemed to have noticed something. She seemed to be a little uncertain. After widening her almond-shaped eyes, she once again focused on Ronan's chest. To be more precise, Tyrant was looking at the emblem of the Marcus family on Ronan's chest. After all, from a diplomatic point of view, it was rather rude to stare at something that belonged to someone else. But Tyrant could not control herself, even muttering to herself, "Impossible. So long ago." Ronan said awkwardly, "Your Excellency Whisperwind, is there something wrong with my emblem? In fact, this is the emblem of my master, Marcus." "Marcus, no." Tyrant bowed slightly, "My apologies, it reminded me of something from ancient times. The emblem that your master passed on to you is very similar to that of an acquaintance of mine from a long, long time ago." Oh, is that so? Ronan could only continue speaking. Tyrant seemed to be very concerned about it. Because elves had rather long eyebrows, the slightest twitch of the muscles between the eyebrows was very obvious. If I may be so bold as to ask, how many years has your master's legacy been passed down? Is it 10,000 years? This question was very strange, and Ronan's question was very abrupt. With regards to Duque's master's inheritance, Luo Ning was also dumbfounded. He only knew that the only master Duque had personally acknowledged was hundred-handed death god Wuxia. The problem was that it had been close to 15 years since the last person to receive the title of master teacher. If Tyrant had asked if it had been 100 years, Ronan would not have dared to answer. But 10,000 years, Ronan laughed. I'm sorry, but humans don't have such a long history as the night elves. 2,800 years ago, when great Emperor Saladin united all the human clans, a kingdom and a more systematic civilization appeared. Even before that, humans were a relatively primitive clan. The earliest recorded human civilization could only be traced back to 4,000 years ago. 10,000 years? That's impossible. I see. Tyrant could not hide the disappointment on her face, but she quickly regained her composure as the high priestess of the moon goddess. My apologies again, I've gone off topic. May I ask, emissary of the Alliance, why are you here? In order to prevent the Burning Legion from invading the Kalimdor continent and the world tree of Hyjal, Nordrassil, I've sent a warning to the night elves. Saying this, Ronan opened his palm. The crystal that could record images projected the scene of Archimonde descending upon Azeroth and destroying the Dalajan. Tyrant's expression froze. The blue light that represented the moon goddess Elun rapidly gathered in her almond-shaped eyes, almost filling up her entire eye sockets. Only by braving the holy light to look at her would one see that her pupils were surrounded by the white of her eyes, looking like azure glass beads. As expected, what I saw in the dream is true. Tyrant's voice was more like a murmur. She thought of the nightmares that had frequently appeared in her dreams over the past month. In the past, whenever she fell asleep and entered a dream, her soul would float up into the sky with Elun's blessing. But recently, she found that her soul could not escape the shackles of the earth, and could only wander around under the clouds. The more she flew down, the closer she got to the moon goddess palace, and the more terrifying scenes appeared in her vision. Mount Hyjal could see them more clearly. The world tree Nordrassil was like this, and the well of eternity was the same. In the well that looked like a large lake, black water swirled wildly, and colorful lake water rolled out from the bottom of the river. It was extremely terrifying. As the huge waves from the lake crashed onto the shore, the powerful magical energy contained in the water of the well of eternity dissipated in all directions. The lake water churned like boiling water. Countless night elf priests and druids prostrated themselves beside the well, praying. But the more they prayed for the well of eternity's forgiveness, the worse it became. In the sky, torrential rain poured down, and thunder and lightning roared. The beautiful houses near the well of eternity were about to be washed away by the lake water. Why was this happening? What happened to the well of eternity? In her hazy dream, Tyrant felt strange and frightened more than once. She turned to look outside Mount Hyjal. The sky was already as dark as the night of Mount Hyjal. No. It was even darker. The thick, black hue only made Tyrant feel that something bad was about to happen. This was really abnormal, and there was definitely danger. What were the sentries in the clan doing? Her soul flew over the mountain path of Mount Hyjal, and she saw that the guards on the path were silent, unable to see her at all. Or was this just a simple dream of hers? She floated to the periphery of the buildings on the mountain top, and was about to go out and see what was going on. She had thought that she could easily pass through the magical barrier around the mountain top, but she encountered an obstacle. Someone had already cast a very complicated and powerful magical incantation around Mount Hyjal, blocking the extension of her senses and preventing her from exploring everything in the outside world. This made her feel like a baby bird waiting to be born in an egg, but she had no idea whether there was a ferocious predatory beast outside that wanted to smash and destroy her, or break the eggshell and drag her out to be devoured. This unknown terror made her very uneasy. But she could not pass through this mysterious and evil magic. Every time she tried, she would feel an unexpected pain. She could not cry out. This pain was not something that could be solved with a few screams. Every time the dream reached this point, all the images would disappear just like that. When she woke up, she found herself once again in the pure and flawless world of the Moon Maiden Temple. She was the high priestess of the Moon Goddess, as well as the leader of the entire Night Elf race, even if she had an ominous premonition in her dreams. Even though there was an ominous foreboding in the dream, she could not make any big moves with just this alone, until she saw Archimonde's image. Chapter 887. Ah! Tyrande let out a soft cry. The dream that had been broken countless times finally connected after seeing Archimonde's image. Tyrande's body shook violently as her mind went into a trance. Death. Violence. Flames. Destruction. The terror that was filled with brutality seemed to have transcended tens of thousands of years and traveled from the ancient time and space. This mysterious power seemed to want to tear her, who was in the dream, into countless pieces and then scatter them all over Mount Hyjal. Her soul felt like it was being torn apart. In this terrifying chaos, she seemed to hear a familiar voice. Tyrande, it's all right, wake up, Tyrande, you must fulfill your duty to protect the world. This was not the gentle female voice of the moon goddess Elune, nor was it the deep and gentle male voice of Cenarius. She vaguely recognized this young male voice. It was a voice that she subconsciously relied on, just like how a drowning person relied on a small piece of driftwood in the ocean. Tyrande felt that the goddess of fate was guiding her in the right direction. As time passed, or perhaps because of those few calls, the pain that the burning legion brought her in the dream eased a little. She felt exhausted. No, this was not the fatigue of the mortal body, this was the fatigue of the soul. It was as if her body wanted to continue drifting in the dream world, and her soul no longer needed to return to her body. But if she did so, she might lose her life, so she had to hold on. Slowly, she could feel her breathing. As the pain in her soul lessened, the voice of the moon goddess became clearer. She could faintly hear the prayers of the priestesses echoing in the temple all year round. Tyrande felt that she had returned to her physical state. Her soul felt like it was hurriedly passing through a layer of mist, the scene in front of her distorted, and her consciousness returned to her eyes. She immediately realized that from the moment she saw Archimonde's image, to the fusion of the dream buried in her heart, to the moment she almost lost her balance and fell, to the moment the guards behind her rushed over anxiously, two of them wanting to help her up, and the other two glaring at Ronan, so many things had happened in just a second. Wait. It has nothing to do with the emissary. Tyrande hurriedly stopped the guards from acting rudely. Lady Whisperwind. One of the priestesses nervously asked. Tyrande waved her hand. No, I'm fine. It's just that these Alliance emissaries finally brought evidence of the Burning Legion's invasion of Azeroth. It's connected to the nightmares I've been having lately, and it's a shock to my mind. The priestess immediately understood. As the chosen one of Elune, Tyrande could easily see through lies. If what Luo Ning brought was fabricated, then what awaited Luo Ning would be the wrath of the entire Night Elves. The image of Archimonde destroying the Dalajan was naturally a fragment that Duque had intercepted when he was using Antonida's mage tower. There was no doubt that it was real. Then things would be much simpler. Tyrande straightened her body and bowed deeply to Ronan and the others. Thank you for traveling such a long distance to bring this important news that could affect the survival of all intelligent lifeforms in the world. I urgently need Elune's guidance. Please rest for a day. Tomorrow, I will lead the higher-ups of the Night Elves to meet you officially. Please wait patiently. That's no problem. Ronan was overjoyed. With that, Tyrande hurriedly instructed her assistant to take good care of Ronan. She then went into the depths of Elune's temple. In the prayer hall dedicated to the high priest, Tyrande gently took off all her clothes and stepped into the crystal pool with the statue of the Elune goddess. She allowed the holy water that poured out from the bottle in the hands of the Elune goddess to drench herself, allowing herself to enter a state where she forgot about everything else and began to communicate with the goddess. Luo Ning and the others heaved a sigh of relief after being brought by a priestess to what should be a guest house in Mount Hyjal. It had not been easy to get here. Because it was still early, Theramore had not formed yet, and there were no magic portals. They had no choice but to cross the endless sea by ship. The fleet that crossed the sea was not large. There were only 7 ships, which attracted the attention of a medium-sized Naga clan. They had fought Nagas, killed murlocs, and even fought a giant octopus with tentacles that were more than 10 meters long. After coming to Theramore to resupply, the journey was still passable. However, after landing in Azhara, they almost killed their way here. They had killed countless Nagas and satyrs along the way. After entering Grey Valley from the west of Azhara, they were ambushed by 200 night elves. Fortunately, they could barely speak the night elven language, so they escaped. One had to know that Luo Ning's group didn't anticipate the power of the first arrow at all. Although it was a warning arrow, they did not react in fear until Luo Ning's magic shield was destroyed. Fortunately, it was a false alarm. In the guest house that was filled with purple and green colors, Luo Ning stared at the green outside the window from the balcony on the 2nd floor. He could not help but say, "How peaceful. I hope this peace can last forever." Unfortunately, we are here to report bad news. Lilith raised her head slightly, and immediately lowered her head to her work. She was using the special juice for rangers to maintain her bowstring. Not far away, Riadaline was doing the same. Originally, the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins could not leave, but considering that Mount Hyjal was fighting against the Scourge army and the demons, Duque still sent her to be the vanguard. Only Brigida Bendis responded to Luo Ning. "Without our fight, there will be no peace for our descendants. That's what my father always told me." Bridget subconsciously combed her slightly longer hair. Luo Ning was a little surprised. "Oh, I didn't expect you to have children." Bridget blushed, and then a little sullen. "Don't look at me like this. I have a more feminine nickname, Bridget. Also, my father has long ordered me to get married and have children before I turn 25. Only after I have children will I be allowed to join the army again." Luo Ning was speechless. He did not expect General Abendis to have such a loving father side. As they chatted, they did not know that at the same time, Tyrant Whisperwind, who had finished praying to the goddess Alun, met the prophet Mediv in the side hall. Chapter 888. The Mediv, who had lost almost all of his power and could only be a prophet, had once thought about how to convince a leader who had guarded his own world for nearly 10,000 years. It wasn't an easy task. Unlike Quell, the loss in the past, the High Elves could still barely interact with human society. The Night Elves were completely isolated, and the ecological cycle of the entire society was a complete closed loop. They didn't need to communicate with the outside world. They didn't need to buy anything from the outside world. What they needed was the most natural ecological cycle in the forest. They rejected any new civilization. Even if a tree was chopped down to build a house, it had to be planted immediately. So, when Mediv saw Tyrant humbly asking about Archimonde's direction and military strength, Mediv heaved a sigh of relief. This is the cycle of 10,000 years. The Burning Legion's target is the Well of Eternity. That's for sure. With the dragon aspect busy, the Night Elves alone can't defend the Well of Eternity. We need to ally with the Horde and Alliance. Alright, next up was the story of an agility-based hero and an intelligence-type hero having a war of words. Round 1. No, I feel that the Night Elves have been preparing for this battle since 9,000 years ago. We can definitely deal with the Burning Legion, Tyron said. Since you're confident, why don't you add 2 more layers of insurance? Tyrant used, proposition, and Mediv used an even more incisive, great proposition. Tyron lost. Round 2. It's not a good idea to increase our military strength. It might cause chaos. The Night Elves, Beastmen, and humans fight differently. It doesn't matter. Everywhere else is protected by the spell formation in the mountain range. There's only one way to Mount Shanger, and it can be guarded by beastmen or humans. We can whittle down the Burning Legion's military strength. Tyrant used, great proposition, and Medivh used, counter-argument. Tyrant lost again. Round 3. Tyrant was a little weak. I don't think the humans and beastmen can stop Archimonde. Medivh said, do the Night Elves have the confidence to deal with Archimonde alone? Tyrant used, concentrate, to defend herself, while Medivh used, provoke. Tyrant was defeated again. According to what you said, you were once possessed by Sardras, and that's why these disasters started. I would like to ask, on what basis should we believe a prophet who was once possessed by the Demon King? In the 4th round, Tyrant finally managed to hurt Medivh a little with paradox. However, this was only the final radiance of a setting sun. That's all in the past. The heroes of the Alliance helped me redeem myself. Medivh knew that Tyrant had been beaten black and blue in the War of Words. He immediately activated Memory Kill. I still remember. In the ancient war, it was the 5 dragon aspects who fought with all their might to destroy the demons that were as numerous as the stars in the sky. Tyrant's stamina bar, which was the stamina she had accumulated during the Battle of Words, was instantly emptied. Alright, in the half-hour meeting, Tyrant, the agile hero, was defeated time and time again in the War of Words. Finally, she made up her mind to prepare for war, and accepted Medivh's suggestion. It was definitely not an easy task to fight against the Burning Legion. After sending off Medivh, Tyrant's first thought was to wake up her childhood friend, the Archdruid Malfurion Stormrage. Under the guidance of the Druid's patron, the demigod Cenarius, the respectable Malfurion Stormrage had been protecting the Night Elves from the invasion of the demons for tens of thousands of years. In the ancient war, Malfurion and other heroes fought against the terrifying Burning Legion to protect all life in Azeroth. Among them were his childhood friend Tyrant Whisperwind and his brother Illidan. After defeating the demons, he worked hard to lead the Night Elves away from their homeland destroyed by the Burning Legion. They rebuilt their homes near Mount Hyjal, and supervised the growth of the World Tree, Nordrassil. The dragon aspect, Isra, connected Nordrassil to the Emerald Dream. It was a reflection of Azeroth that was free of war and unaffected by mortals. He allowed all druids, including Malfurion, to enter this country. Malfurion and the other druids had explored this dream for thousands of years. Sigh, it's time to wake him and the other druids up. If possible, Tyrant did not want to face Malfurion directly, because it would cause awkwardness. How should she describe her relationship with Malfurion? They were more than friends, but not lovers. If it weren't for what happened 10,000 years ago, perhaps she would have chosen Malfurion as her partner between Illidan and Malfurion, who were both her childhood friends. But, sigh. Tyrant looked at her exquisite reflection in the pool and suddenly sighed. Now is not the time to be thinking about this. Although it was troublesome to lead a race that worshipped nature and peace, it was not too difficult. She could handle it all by herself. When it came to dealing with the Burning Legion that the Penishade Guardian Dragons had used all of their power to defeat, even if Archimonde did not have his full power, this was not something that Tyrant could handle alone. Melland. Tyrant's voice traveled through space and reached the outside of the reception hall. Soon, a high-ranked priestess with a purple ponytail appeared at the door. Is it you who summoned me? High Priestess. Summon the sentries. I'm going to wake Malfurion tonight. As one of Tyrant's confidants, Melland immediately understood the importance of the situation. This high-ranked priestess with 2 special purple lines drawn from the corners of her eyes and cheeks immediately bowed and retreated. The next moment, a short melody sounded in the church. Only the guards of the Moon Church understood the meaning behind it. The night deepened. When the new moon rose, Melland had already gathered a group of 500 church guards and was waiting for Tyrant at the entrance of the church. Tyrant was very satisfied. When she appeared at the entrance, she was also dressed in military attire, looking even more valiant and heroic. The exquisite moon-white armor was full of curved silver carvings. This was not just for the sake of beauty. If one looked closely, they would find that each carving was actually constructed from the image of a crescent moon. These crescent moons of various sizes contained the mysterious power of the goddess of the moon, Elun. As Tyron stepped onto the steps leading to the hall, she could clearly feel the faint moonlight being absorbed by the mysterious runes on her armor. This was the power of the goddess of the moon. Let's go. Chapter 889. Unlike most other intelligent races, the night elves were nocturnal creatures. Although the high elves, who shared the same bloodline as them, also had the mystical talent of night vision, the night elves also had the shadow evasion that the high elves did not have. At night, as long as they remained still, the power of the moon god would make them disappear from the sight of mortals. Of course, this was only a form of visual deception. This did not prevent the night elves from showing the world how much the moon god doted on them. Of the 500 temple guards, 350 were night elf archers, while 150 were the night elf specialty, huntresses. These huntresses rode on night saber that was pure black and could also hide in the shadows and darkness. They held a special weapon that was as large as a plate and had 3 sharp edges. This mystical special weapon had the effect of rebounding enemies nearby when it hit them. Tyrant herself rode on a huge saber-toothed tiger with black stripes on it. With a whistle, this squadron of elite guards of the moon god hall left the summit of Mount Hyjal at high speed. Soon, they left the main road. At this time, the night elves' racial talent was on full display. In the complex terrain of the mountain, be it the elven archers on foot or the huntresses riding on night saber, they all moved as if they were flying. The rugged terrain could not stop them at all. Mount Hyjal was huge. Due to the terrain, they had to first enter Fellwood Forest to the west, then head south to Grey Valley to reach the east of Malfurion's Grey Valley. Even with their outstanding ability to pass through the mountains, they could not ignore the demons that appeared in the forest along the way. They cleared out the demons as they advanced, and it took them a full 13 days. Then, they received a grievous news. The demigod Cenarius had been killed by the Fell Orcs' leader, Gromhelscream. This news made Tyrande and the temple guards furious, pained, and helpless. They had just heard Medivh say that the night elves should have allied with the human alliance and the orc tribes, and now their demigod had been killed. This was a resounding slap to the face. High Priest. What do we do? Shouldn't we form an army and deal with the beastmen first? Tyrande's trusted aide, Melland, was furious. Tyrande shook her head, no. According to the Sentinel's report, the wounds on Cenarius' body were filled with a demonic aura. This should be a demon's scheme. We can't simply blame it on the beastmen. Have you forgotten about Queen Azhara? Queen Azhara was the earliest ruler of the elves. Her royal power could be traced back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago. It was because of the queen's fall that she colluded with the enemy and attracted the Burning Legion, which officially started the ancient war over the Well of Eternity. Demons, Burning Legion. This was the eternal pain of the night elves. The demigod Cenarius didn't leave us forever. A demigod's life form is different from ours. He'll return one day. Tyrande consoled her subordinates, but she started to hate the orcs from the bottom of her heart, labeling them as untrustworthy. It was not an easy task to wake Malfurion, who was exploring the Emerald Dream. It was impossible to wake him up just by pouring water on him. Tyrande needed Cenarius' horn, but when she arrived near Cenarius' body, she found it surrounded by a group of satyrs. After a battle, Tyrande snatched the horn back and went to Malfurion's hiding place, using the horn to wake him up. After sleeping in the Emerald Dream for 1,000 years, Malfurion had given his body to the earth, sharing his fate with the earth and breathing with the forest. In the end, Malfurion was awakened from the deepest dream by the familiar voice. The moment he opened his eyes and saw the beautiful face that he had loved for 10,000 years, he could not help but feel a pang in his heart. If not for the accident that had occurred in that battle 10,000 years ago, perhaps he and Tyrande would have fallen in love with each other. Here, he wanted to express the love in his heart, but he had no choice but to suppress his emotions. There were many temple guards watching from the side. He knew that Tyran did not like to show her feelings in front of outsiders. Before they knew it, the sun had risen. A glaring yet comforting heat suddenly appeared in front of them. This reddish heat warmed Malfurion's body inside and out, reminding him of his childhood. Back then, he had been constantly learning to grow in the world. Together with his brother Illidan, unknowingly, they had fallen in love with the same person. Unfortunately, that was a distant memory. Malfurion sat up, lowered his head, and said in a low voice, "Wake me up. Is there an emergency?" Tyrande was relieved that Malfurion was not overly agitated. She replied in a delicate and elegant voice with a hint of divinity, "The Burning Legion has arrived again." With Tyrande's brief explanation, Malfurion understood what had happened and his responsibilities. "Then we need to wake up more druids. Unfortunately, they are sleeping in the underground caves." Just as Tyrande was about to wake up more druids with Malfurion as planned, there was a sudden commotion outside. Enemy? Tyrande and Malfurion gripped their weapons at almost the same time. At this time, Melland came in. "There's a very powerful human mage outside who wants to see Lord Whisperwind. He claims to be the commander of the alliance from the eastern kingdoms on the other side of the sea, Duke Marcus." "He's alone?" Malfurion was a little surprised. "Yes, perhaps he has absolute confidence in his own strength." After a pause, Melland emphasized, he doesn't have it. There's a family crest on his chest that's similar to Ronan's, but even more exquisite." Tyrande felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Malfurion and said, "Let him in." Duque walked in with light footsteps. The Night Elves were a very important part of the Alliance. Although every kingdom in the Alliance had their own problems, the Night Elves' problem was more important. After dealing with Grom Hellscream, Duque flew towards the place where Malfurion had woken up in his memory. However, he didn't expect that with Ronan at the front line and Medivh informing him, the first thing he saw the most beautiful Night Elf Tyrande would be her knocking an arrow and pointing it at him. She questioned him sternly, "You're a Night Elf?" "You?" "Yes." "Who?" Chapter 890. Duke was dumbfounded. Even if he was brave. Even if he was used to big scenes. He was completely baffled by Tyrande's sudden hostility. He was certain that his identity as the Alliance's commander had been reported. From the moment he stepped into this area, Tyrande and Malfurion had not made any hostile moves. It was only when Tyrande saw his appearance that she suddenly felt enmity towards him. This meant that he was the one to blame. Moreover, Tyrande's hostility caused a chain reaction. Malfurion and Tyrande's personal guards around him immediately started fighting each other with their swords. Being pointed at by an archdruid wielding a nature magic staff and hundreds of arrows, Duque could not remain calm. Duke believed in Brother Spring's revival. But that depended on who he was facing. In the face of the Beast Men, before Sal started to become a shaman like in history, even if Duke was hacked to death 100 times, he would still dare to shout, "I'll resurrect on the spot for you to see." But Duque was afraid of two things. First, he was afraid of demons. If he died, even his soul would be enslaved or burned for 1,000 years. Second, he was afraid of real scammers. If Malfurion's soul was released from purgatory and returned to nature, it would be a tragedy for Duke, who would never be able to see his sister's grave. Almost subconsciously, Duque raised his hands, sweat dripping from his hair. He spoke in perfect Elvish, "Wait. Is your excellency mistaken about something?" "No. There's no mistake. It's you." Tyrande's voluptuous breasts were heaving up and down, as if they were going to break the laces holding the armor together at any moment. Of course, Duque was not in the mood to appreciate such a beautiful scene. Malfurion spoke up, "Tyrande, you must be mistaken. It can't be him." Duque hurriedly went with the flow, "I swear, this is the first time I've seen the two of you. If the Alliance has offended the Night Elves in any way, I'll apologize on their behalf. There was no reason for there to be a conflict. Even if there was, it was the Alliance's problem. If we have to take the blame, let's take the blame together." In Duque's mind, two cauldrons had already appeared. One was a big cauldron that could fit hundreds of people in a cafeteria. You would need to use a paddle to stir it. Yes, this was the Alliance's cauldron. There was nothing wrong with it. The other was a small cauldron that was used by children to play house. It was smaller than a palm. Yes, this was Duque's cauldron. No matter how big the problem was, the entire Alliance would shoulder it. What virtue and ability do I have to bear this kind of inexplicable blame for the Alliance? Duque the scapegoat had already made up his mind. If there was anything, he would just refuse to confess even if he beat him to death. On this side, Duque froze. On the other side, Tyrande looked like a wronged wife. Her lips were trembling, and her body was trembling. It can't be him. Humans don't have an eternal lifespan. At most, he is his descendant. Malfurion, who had already put down his staff, kept trying to persuade her. Moreover, as the chosen of Elun, can't you sense that this is really the first time he has seen you? On the other side, Duque, who had raised his hand in surrender, gave Malfurion a thumbs up in his heart. I'm really innocent. This is my first time seeing Tyrande. Well, eternal lifespan is another matter. Tyrande pursed her lips and put down the bow in her hand, a little dejectedly. I'm sorry. I must have made a mistake. You can't be him. He is from 10,000 years ago. I am deeply sorry for the offense just now. Moreover, even if you are him, he is a benefactor to me, to the entire Night Elven race, and even to the entire world. Duque's balls were hurting. What the hell is this? Regardless of whether I'm your enemy or not, is this how you treat your benefactor? For a moment, Duque almost wanted to curse. Unfortunately, the next moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. Wait, 10,000 years ago? Isn't that something that happened in the ancient war? As a transmigrator who was familiar with the original history, Duque knew about the future. Although this future had been messed up by him, there were still many things that Duque still knew. If one were to talk about the ancient war that happened 10,000 years ago, then one had to mention a divine drama in the original history of transmigration. In the near future, Krasis, the orc Brock, and the others, due to an accident, transmigrated back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago and were forced to participate in the incomparably famous ancient war around the Well of Eternity. It was in that battle that because of the heroic performance of the orc hero Brock, one of the bosses of the Burning Legion, Kill Jaden, set his eyes on the orcs. That was how Kill Jaden found the orcs in Draenor. Under the premise that there was a magic circle in Azeroth to expel the big bosses of the Burning Legion, Kill Jaden used the orcs who could avoid the magic circle to invade the world of Azeroth. The incident this time was more like a huge closed loop. Because the people of the present messed around and changed the history of the past, then the history of the past turned around and affected the present. If that was the case, the current situation could be explained clearly. The biggest possibility was that the future Duque had somehow participated in this divine drama of transmigration and went back to 10,000 years ago. Then, under the premise of ensuring that the Burning Legion would still be defeated and scram, he did something that caused Tyrande's wrath. This caused Tyrande, who saw the present Duque for the first time in 15 years at the Dark Portal, to be extremely sensitive and excited. All right. Since he was acting cool, he had to act till the end even if he cried and knelt. In that case, would he have to pay for the sins that he had done in the future? If Duque was a true saint, perhaps Duque would admit to it now. But who was Duque? That cheap university animal down to his bones. Never heard of him? Confess and you'll be imprisoned forever. Resist and you'll go home for the new year. Confess what? I haven't done anything yet. I won't confess even if I'm beaten to death. Not only did he not confess, Duque even used Alonso's fail's moral integrity. His face was filled with a peaceful light. This time, Malfurion and the other guards were all relieved. A filthy demon would not have such holy power. However, Tyrande was even more certain that Duque had a mysterious connection with the him in the memories. All of this had been suppressed. However, looking at Tyron's flushed face, Malfurion felt his heart throb again. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to recognize that this was caused by faint envy and jealousy. Because he knew that this beautiful elf before him had always been the one he loved deeply. But because of that incident, she had never truly accepted his love for the next 10,000 years. Chapter 891. As Tyron's assistant, Melland had always been the most loyal to her boss. But at this moment, she was also dumbfounded. If it were translated into Duzay's words, her current feeling would be, F***ck. What a load of information. Was the circle of nobles really messed up for 10,000 years? Wasn't that so? In the thousands of years before the War of the Ancients, outsiders believed that Tyron would definitely choose one of the Stormrage brothers. Who knew that after the War of the Ancients, whether it was Tyron or the Stormrage brothers, that matter was taboo and refused to talk about it. After that, Tyron started to distance herself from the two brothers. After all, the two of them didn't need to report to enter the Moon Maiden Temple. In any case, Melland's expression was written all over her face, I'm also helpless. However, there seemed to be new developments in this love triangle that had been going on for 10,000 years. Could it be that the one rumored to have ruined their relationship was the ancestor of this seemingly powerful alliance commander? Night elves were a very closed-off society. Although there were more than 1 million night elves, after 10,000 years, what kind of gossip hadn't spread? It wasn't just Melland. Even the seemingly loyal temple guards secretly pricked up their ears. Their gossipy souls were raging. Tyron's almond-shaped eyes swept the surroundings. Immediately, every archer and huntress lowered their gazes, not daring to meet her eyes. Tyron bowed deeply, my apologies, Sir Marcus. Because of a misunderstanding, you were startled. As the leader of the Night Elves, I was lacking in manners. If you think you need any compensation, feel free to mention it. Leaning over was the most alluring angle for a woman. Due to gravity, the allure would be magnified infinitely. Fortunately, Duke had seen a lot of Mount Hyjal archery. After all, the 3 Windrunner sisters were female rangers, and 2.5 of them were already in their stomachs. At least he had developed some immunity, or else the old Duke would not have dared to look over. At this moment, the gentlemanly Duque displayed his acting skills. He smiled confidently and said, Lord Yufeng's words are too heavy. Since it's a misunderstanding, there's no need to offend him. With the Burning Legion before us, shouldn't we put aside our differences and work together? That's why I'm here. Duque's generosity made many night elves secretly heave a sigh of relief. Duque's next words raised his image infinitely. If there is any compensation that must be made, I hope that you can forgive the tribe for accidentally killing the demigod Cenarius. After all, it was a demon's plot. As soon as he said that, the hearts of every night elf present seemed to be grabbed by 2 invisible hands and torn into 2. Even if Tyrant had said that Cenarius was not truly dead. But when the enemy was right in front of them, the Beast Men race had killed one of their powerhouses. It would be strange if they weren't angry. Many elves were so excited that they almost raised their weapons again. Tyrant stretched out her hand to stop her subordinates from moving. Tyrant raised her head and lifted her delicate chin slightly. Her eyes were filled with a complicated light. I've seen your student, Ronan. If his description is correct, the human-dominated alliance and beast-dominated tribe were mortal enemies before this, right? That's right. Duque admitted frankly. Ever since the Dark Portal opened 15 years ago, the tribe invaded the southernmost eastern kingdom, Stormwind, which is also my homeland. The alliance and the tribe have never truly reconciled. Under the brutal Beastman's campaign of burning villages and massacring cities, no less than 5 million human compatriots had died at the hands of the Beastmen. It's not an exaggeration to say that the alliance and the tribe have a blood feud. Then you, Duke, changed the topic. In fact, from the past until now, there have been 4 great chiefs in the tribe. The first 3, Blackhand, Orgrim, and Zul, all died in front of me. Even if I wasn't the mastermind, they all died because of me. If not for the solemn atmosphere, some of the night elf beauties might have burst out laughing. This scene was too strange and out of place. A leader of the alliance who killed 3 chiefs and had a blood feud with them was actually pleading for the enemy? However, Tyrant and Malfurion couldn't help but puff out their chests and suck in their stomachs in awe. They were waiting for Duque's answer. It might sound contradictory, doesn't it? But be it the alliance or the tribe, no matter which side wins in the end, it's just a change in the ruling race of planet Azeroth. But if the Burning Legion wins, then planet Azeroth will be completely destroyed. Duque's words were sonorous and resolute. This was the relationship between a small contradiction and the biggest contradiction. In the face of a planet's survival, the deaths of millions of people in the past 15 years were just a small contradiction not worth mentioning. What was the big picture? This was the big picture. Duque's words made Tyrant feel ashamed. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been delusional enough to think that she could fight against the Burning Legion led by the Archaerons alone. Compared to Duque's resolution to join forces with his mortal enemy for the big picture, her previous thoughts were so insignificant. At this moment, Malfurion placed a hand on the triple-carved pauldrons on Tyrant's left shoulder and said in a low voice, "Even humans have such resolution. We night elves can't be too petty. Moreover, after the last battle, we've spent 9,000 years and still haven't completely healed the damage to the earth." The damage to the earth. This was the greatest pain in the hearts of the night elves who mainly believed in the teachings of the druids. Tyrant nodded hard and strode towards Duque with her head held high. She extended her hand. "I heard that you humans treat handshakes as a symbol of friendship and unity. In that case, I think that in this huge crisis, we night elves, the Alliance, and even the tribe should work together." "Yes." Duque shook Tyrant's hand firmly. This was a historic handshake. In the eyes of future historians, this was also a handshake that signaled the night elves joining the Alliance. With the foundation set, everything else was easy to discuss. "Yes, I haven't asked. Marcus, why are you here this time? Don't be so formal. Call me Duque, I'll get used to it." My surname is actually Du, not Ma." Then, Duque roughly explained the situation of the Burning Legion that he knew, and finally pointed out his goal. "You're saying that the Death Knight Arthas, the strongest lackey of the Calamity army who killed his father, destroyed 4 kingdoms, and half of Lordaeron, came to Kalimdor alone?" Chapter 892. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Now that he had matured, Duque understood better what was needed for diplomacy between countries and factions. Before he'd transmigrated, Premier Zhou had proposed a very good idea, seeking common ground while reserving differences. With this principle in mind, with the same enemy and goals that could be reconciled, the Night Elves joining the alliance was a matter of course. Now that Duque had mentioned killing Arthas, Tyrant and Malfurion didn't feel anything at first. However, when Duque said that we have evidence that Arthas is using the skull of Gul'dan, one of the culprits of the first and second Dark Portal, to pollute and destroy Fellwood Forest, the 2 Night Elves couldn't sit still anymore. No one was more worried about the situation in the forest than the Night Elves. On their way here, Tyrant had already ordered her sentries to kill many satyrs, but the demons seemed endless. If not for the imminent invasion of the Burning Legion, Tyrant would have definitely turned back to Mount Hyjal and sent her troops to wipe out the entire Fellwood Forest. Now, with Duque's spoiler, they finally understood the root of the problem. Tyrant gritted her teeth, looking like she wanted the white tiger she was riding on to tear Arthas apart. Malfurion was even more unbelievable. The surging power of nature from his body made his long hair and beard float in midair. If his hair and beard were golden, he would be even more golden-haired than the Lion King. After days of killing demons, the guards of the Temple of Light weren't unharmed. Thinking of their sisters who had been sacrificed, Melanie and the other elves were furious. "Do you know where Arthas is?" Tyrant asked. Duque shook his head. "As the main leader of the Calamity army, we noticed Arthas as soon as he disappeared from the front lines of the Eastern Kingdom. Unfortunately, I was already in the Kalandor continent at the time and couldn't track him further. We could only rely on the Radiant Moon Archmages from the Alliance who were nearby to sense that Arthas had come to Felwood through spatial fluctuations. Duque was just bullshitting. He was relying on his knowledge of the plot and guessing. What if Arthas didn't appear? In any case, every region covered tens of thousands of square kilometers. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't find such a large place. What if he found it? That would be fun. If there was another Lich King who could defeat Arthas, they wouldn't have to attack the Ice Crown Fortress anymore. How convenient. Then we also. Tyrant was about to say that the Night Elves also had helpers, but she suddenly realized that she still had important matters to attend to. She could only change her words. I left Mount Hyjal this time to awaken the Druids who were sleeping in Grey Valley and other places. In the upcoming Holy War on Mount Hyjal, they are indispensable combat power. So we. Duque smiled in understanding. It's okay. Our goals are not in conflict. We're only going to send a few powerhouses into Felwood Forest to try our luck. With that, Duque handed over a list of names. If it wasn't for the signs of the Burning Legion's arrival, the isolated Night Elves wouldn't have liked outsiders to enter. Since they had a common enemy in the Burning Legion, it wouldn't be a big deal to let a few humans and elves enter Felwood Forest, excluding the prominent backgrounds of the people on the list. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief. Then it shouldn't be a problem. With just a few of you, aren't you worried that you won't be able to deal with that cruel villain Arthas? Duque's eyes flashed. You should be worried that he won't meet us. The confidence in his words made Tyrant and the other elves' hearts skip a beat, but then they were overjoyed. No matter what, a strong ally was always more reliable than a useless teammate. In fact, Duque was also secretly laughing in his heart. If the flow of fate hadn't collapsed, then the famous egg, Illidan Stormrage, would be making his appearance. In Azeroth, there were many famous heroes who had fallen into depravity that made the players sigh. Perhaps they all came from a good background, or they could have been heroes or saviors, but due to fate, they fell into the dark side. The former paladin Prince Arthas was the same. The original Prince Kael, that was the same. Illidan, who was about to appear next, gave Duque a similar feeling. But unlike the previous idiots, Illidan wasn't an absolutely positive character from the start. Illidan was Malfurion Stormrage's twin brother. Like his older brother, the two brothers grew up together with priestess tyrant Whisperwind thousands of years before the War of the Ancients. Unlike his older brother, Malfurion, Illidan had no patience for learning the teachings of the Druids even though both brothers had studied under the demigod Cenarius. Cenarius felt that Illidan's current condition wasn't suitable for him to directly learn the mysteries of nature, so he didn't teach him directly. Instead, he suggested that Illidan learn from Malfurion. This decision made Illidan feel defeated and humiliated. For the first time, he felt pressure from his older brother. In the end, Illidan decided to focus on arcane magic, which was the mainstream of the Night Elves at the time, and achieved very good results. He had amber eyes, which were rare among the Night Elves before they split. This was usually considered a good omen for his future, even though Illidan didn't show any extraordinary abilities at the time. But what he didn't know was that this was a prophecy from millions of years ago, an unimaginable ancient era. Illidan became addicted to arcane magic and gradually learned more advanced spells. But to his disappointment, the Night Elves' mage army, the Moon Guards, didn't accept him because he had learned high-level magic. However, Illidan still decided to become the kind of hero that his people hoped for in order to win the heart of the beautiful Tyrant that the two brothers fell in love with. His chance had come. It was the War of the Ancients that could destroy all of Azeroth 10,000 years ago. The Burning Legion corrupted the powerful Sarvis and seduced the High Elf Queen Azhara. The Queen opened a huge portal to welcome the arrival of the demon army, and the situation in Azeroth was desperate. At this time, Illidan played a beautiful trick and pretended to obey the demon king Sargeras. Then, together with his brother, he analyzed the High Elves' magic and reversed it. All the demons in Azeroth were thrown back into the twisting nether by the suction produced by the portal, and its collapse caused the Well of Eternity to explode. He could have become a hero, but he stubbornly built a second well of eternity, attacked a group of night elves, and killed a night elf noble who had made outstanding contributions. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Chapter 893. If it was a human, even if you were young, anyone would die after a few decades of life imprisonment. But Illidan was a night elf. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment after receiving the blessing of eternal life. For the next 10,000 years, Illidan Stormrage lived alone in a very deep underground prison and was personally guarded by the Watcher May of Shadowsong. Anyone who sat in prison for a long time would be full of resentment, not to mention that it was 10,000 years. It was a miracle that he did not become a lunatic. Anyway, Duque did not understand why the original tyrant would think that a few thousand years of living together could make up for the resentment of 10,000 years of imprisonment, and was actually stupid enough to let Illidan out. Since Duque could not change the fact that Illidan had been imprisoned for 10,000 years and his mentality was extremely twisted, then Duque did not plan to stop this from happening. After all, Illidan's so-called fall had little to do with the alliance. Moreover, most of Illidan's actions were chasing after the Scourge army and then the Burning Legion. He seemed to have even dug up the ancestral graves of the Draenei, but what did this have to do with the current alliance? Moreover, since ancient times, the ones who killed the most people in history were traitors. Illidan was very active in killing the Burning Legion. He was even more aggressive than the Vanguard. Didn't they see that in the end, due to the trend of the times, even the Alliance accepted warlocks who used demonic powers, death knights, and demon hunters? If Duke killed Illidan before he could master his demonic powers and become a demon hunter, Tyrande and Malfurion would not be able to do anything about it. The loss of a demon hunter in the future would be enough to make Duke's head hurt. Moreover, if Illidan did not become dark, how would Duque have the chance to go to the Black Temple to farm Twin Blades of Azzinoth? Thinking back to when the pure and innocent Duque was the leader, he had a lucky hand. This, Twin Blades of Azzinoth, commonly known as the Egg Knife, was so common that all thieves and warriors in the team had one. In the end, no one wanted it, and even a mage like him had one. Afterwards, Duque would go to Iron Forge, the place with the most players. Whenever he saw a poor thief, he would go up to them and place the godly weapon in the trade window. The titanium alloy dog eyes of those poor black thieves of dazzling flower. Bah! Bitch! You're a mage, yet you're trying to steal a thief's equipment? He could still remember the scolding in the local channel, and then after Duque typed, the whole world went dead silent. That's how popular my team is. Even mages could pick up an egg blade to play with. If you want an egg cleaver and are skilled enough, PM me. In the next instant, Duque's private chat was flooded with messages. Under the temptation of the divine artifact, even the main thieves of the Dead Water Guild, the archenemy of the Duque Guild, came to lick their boots. That was awesome. Cough, cough. You've gone off topic. In any case, Duque had basically achieved his goal of coming here this time, which was to make himself known. Then, Tyrande asked, I wonder how many troops the Alliance can send to resist the Burning Legion. Duque raised his hands and put up 10 fingers. I heard that the mountain path up Mount Hyjal is narrow, so I only plan to send 50,000 mechanized mountain divisions to help defend the mountain. Also, 80,000 troops will cut off the Archeron's retreat after they enter Mount Hyjal to prevent more demons from the Burning Legion from coming up the mountain. Tyrande nodded. She was very satisfied with this number. Although she didn't understand what mechanized mountain divisions were, 130,000 troops was exactly what the Night Elves wanted. An immortal race was most likely not a race with strong fertility. The Night Elves did have millions of people, but they were spread across many regions. From the Feathermoon Fortress on Sodder Island in the southwest of the continent, to the vast Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest, Mount Hyjal, and Teldrassil Island across the sea. Even though the Night Elves were said to be all soldiers, the number of elites that could actually gather on Mount Hyjal was only about 300,000. After all, it was the famous Burning Legion. It would be great if the Alliance and the Horde could share the losses. Then, Duque, Elune told me that the Burning Legion's vanguard will land in Azhara in about a week. I hope to see the Alliance's army then. Duque bowed. In fact, our troops have already started to land in Azhara. We will be the first and second line of defense to stop the Burning Legion. Duque's words surprised Tyrande, but she was immediately delighted. She had been a little worried that she wouldn't be able to wake up all the sleeping druids before the Burning Legion arrived. Now that the Alliance was so loyal to them, this was definitely a huge advantage for the Night Elves. Tyrande bowed deeply this time. Then I will thank the Alliance on behalf of the people of this world. After meeting Tyrande, Duque directly teleported to the beach in the Azhara region. There was naturally someone there to set up a teleportation circle for Duque. Coming out of the teleportation circle, Duque couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, the world barrier of this world was still very strong against demons. Most demons that were Lord level or above could not teleport from one corner of Azeroth to another. Otherwise, the Alliance and the Horde would be done for. Just wait for death. Looking west from the broken beach of Azhara, Storm Bay was an extremely busy scene. From afar, if you said that it was the famous Normandy landing in World War II on Earth, Duque would even believe it. The effect of Duque's early arrival in Azeroth and the explosion of black technology was fully displayed at this moment. There were countless giant steel warships. From afar, countless chimneys were emitting black smoke. Up close, it was easy to see that almost every warship was a giant steel beast made from thick iron sheets and large rivets the size of a fist. From the huge black holes at the back of the ships, strange rectangular boats were pulled out and quickly rushed onto the beach. One after another, heavy steam tanks followed the road that the mages had reinforced with sand to stone, and drove onto the beach, entering the main road from Azhara to Grey Valley. In the ruins of Idraz near the main road, small teams of Alliance professionals could be seen everywhere. With the help of the beginner Dalajan mages, they cleared out the vengeful spirits in the ruins, the surrounding Naga, and all kinds of messy low-level demons, paving the way for the army to advance. Suddenly, a voice came. Yo, Duque, I thought you were obsessed with the Night Elf High Priest and refused to come back. Duque bared his teeth. There weren't many people who could mock him so unscrupulously. It was a pity that Servanas was one of the few who could do so. Chapter 894. Queen Sylvanas today was beautiful. Now that she was a queen, she could no longer wear the outfit of her former ranger general. Of course, the general equipment was not changed, but the originally low-key green jungle equipment was all replaced with the gorgeous gold jewelry of the High Elves' aristocratic style. At first glance, Duque thought he was looking at the supermodels in Victoria's Secret before he transmigrated. Looking at the two long legs, as well as the exposed hemispheres and slender waist, please forgive the shameless Duke for swallowing his saliva. Of course, if one thought that the shiny silver crescent longbow in Queen Sylvanas' hand was some kind of decoration or a sex toy, it would be a big mistake. Taking a demon's head from 1,000 meters away was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Using a scimitar at close range to kill enemies was like chopping melons and vegetables. Sometimes, one's aura rose along with one's status and identity. She had not been a queen for long, but her heroic and noble aura made people feel a sense of majesty from a few meters away. If Duque was not a Grand Duke and the commander of the Alliance, he would not be able to suppress this fierce girl. Since they had kissed and hugged each other, Duke naturally wouldn't mind going up and getting intimate with the woman in his pot. If there wasn't another person around. Duque was a little annoyed. Because Jaina was there too. Although she was still wearing the same battle mage equipment, the changes were still obvious. First was the shiny silver crown. Duque was not surprised that the crown of Quell Tiras would eventually fall on Jaina's head. After all, she was the legitimate heir of Dellen's line. The key was that Jaina wore lipstick and light makeup today. In the past, in order to weaken her image as a princess and strengthen her identity as a mage, Jaina would wear a mage's attire all day and never wear any makeup. Of course, she was naturally beautiful and did not need makeup. But with makeup, her lethality was more than doubled. Before Du transmigrated, Japanese makeup technique, was one of the 4 great evil techniques in Asia, along with Thai sex change, Korean plastic surgery, and Chinese Photoshop. Jaina didn't hesitate to use one of the 4 great evil arts today. Duke would rather not know why. Jaina was the first to step forward and perform a ladylike bow from a suitable distance. Of course, wearing a mage robe wasn't bad either. After all, she was wearing the same silver breastplate as always. Duque, thank you for taking over the negotiations with the night elves when I was depressed. Now I've sorted out my feelings. I didn't believe in fate before. There were some things that I thought would never come to me, and I had already given up on fighting for them. But since it's the will of the goddess of destiny, I have to fight for it no matter what. You're welcome. Duque tried to avoid the topic. Taking a deep breath, Jaina continued, however, I have to avenge my father and second brother. Before that, I will not hold a formal enthronement ceremony. If I'm lucky enough to kill Archimonde, then I hope that you, Duque, will do me the honor of attending my enthronement ceremony. At this point, Jaina glanced at Sylvanas, intentionally or unintentionally. I hope that you can give me the same opportunity as His Majesty Menethil and His Majesty Windrunner. On the surface, Jaina was talking about the royal family of Quell, Tiras, but in reality, her attitude made Duque's teeth hurt. Beside him, Queen Sylvanas smiled without saying a word, which made Duque a little scared. Fortunately, the arrival of Turalian and the others diluted the awkwardness. Looking at the lineup, Duque couldn't help but smile. Turalian with Quell, Zaram, Mograine with Ashbringer, Bulang Bronzebeard, Sedan Dathrahan, Sylvanas, Lillis, Riadaline, Jaina, Ronan, Prince Kale, that's, and 2 master astromancers. If he, Duque, and Tyrande were added, it would be an all-star team of 15. It was precisely because he was worried that the Burning Legion would cause trouble that Duque had mobilized almost all the Alliance's powerhouses that he could. On the Eastern Kingdom's side, there were only people like Magni, Kudrin, Abendis, and the injured Lothar. Queen Sylvanas glanced at the countless steel beasts on the beach and suddenly sighed, if not for the fact that guns and cannons are ineffective against demons, I would have thought that bows and swords have already left the stage of history. Duque was a little embarrassed, and Bulang was a little naggy. Duque still said, different regions have different ways of fighting. Before the Burning Legion enters Mount Hyjal, we mainly focus on a war of attrition. My intelligence shows that Archimonde is constantly summoning demons. I have to remind you not to be afraid. Although Archimonde can summon demons infinitely in theory, Azeroth's protective spell formation is still in effect. So, the number of demon soldiers he can receive every day is limited. There were no idiots here. Jaina's eyes flashed, in other words, as long as we eliminate the demons faster, we can suppress the Burning Legion? Yes. As long as Archimonde starts to enter Mount Hyjal, he will be affected by the spell formation set up by the Night Elves and Dragons, and it will be almost impossible to summon new demons to Azeroth. In order to deal with him, we must first completely separate him from his subordinates. Duque made a cutting motion with his hand. Understood. The purpose of the Alliance army is to exhaust those low-level and mid-level demons. Bulang Bronzebeard understood immediately. Yes, the line of defense of Azeroth will be left to you dwarves, as well as a mixed team of Dalajan and Blood Elf mages. Duque raised his head. This line of defense will be handled by Bulang, Ronan, and Kale, that's. Bulang and the other 2 nodded in unison. Duque then pointed to the east of Grey Valley. The Night Elves have already abandoned this place because they suffered heavy losses in the previous conflict with the Horde. Sylvanas, I'll leave this place to your rangers. Leave it to me. Queen Sylvanas proudly straightened her back. Duque emphasized, listen, at this stage, the demons can't be completely killed. So my instruction to you is, preserve the land and lose the people, and lose both the people and the land. Preserve the people and lose the land, and the people and the land will be protected. Don't stubbornly resist. If the situation is not good, retreat according to the predetermined route. Understood. They answered together. The rest of you, follow me to Mount Hyjal to set up the line of defense. At this point, Duque paused, but before that, the few of you will first follow me to a place, in a huge underground cave in Grey Valley. As if guided by fate, Tyrande turned her head in an instant and found an ancient cellar. Even though the entrance had been concealed by nature magic, it was only to deceive outsiders. Tyrande immediately realized where she was, the place where Illidan was imprisoned. Chapter 895. How could Malfurion not know what Tyrande was thinking? He objected almost immediately. No. This is not suitable. Tyrande. Illidan, he. But before he could finish, Tyrande interrupted him. We need a true powerhouse. Normal attacks can't hurt Archimonde at all. Malfurion's face turned green, but he couldn't find a reason to refuse. That's right. The one coming was the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. The vanguard of the demons. The super demon leader who had destroyed countless planets by himself. He wasn't naive enough to think that Archimonde, one of the 3 leaders of the Burning Legion, could be killed by sheer numbers. If it was possible, there wouldn't be the terrifying legend of Archimonde beating the world. But the Night Elves didn't have many powerhouses who had entered the realm of heroes, so they could all be killed with a single slap. Malfurion was suddenly a little envious of the alliance. Just looking at that Duke Marcus, although he didn't make a move and was even showing weakness, Malfurion and Tyrande could faintly feel that if he made a move, apart from the 2 of them, none of the Night Elves present would be able to survive. In ancient times, when the Night Elves and High Elves were still one family, super powerful mages like Duque who had the power to destroy an entire city were not uncommon. Savi's was like that, and so was Queen Azhara. But the strong wouldn't find weak teammates to help. From the list of people that Duque had voluntarily provided to kill Arthas, it was easy to deduce that the alliance definitely had many top powerhouses. Malfurion still wanted to object. Tyrande. Have you forgotten? How did Illidan end up in prison? Besides, after 10,000 years of imprisonment, we still don't know how he is now. If Malfurion wasn't Illidan's big brother, he might even say something like, "You released another demon to deal with one demon." Of course, this was impossible. After all, it was Illidan who had made a huge mistake, and Malfurion had single-handedly protected him. But 10,000 years had passed, and perhaps the little bit of affection from back then had long been worn away by endless loneliness and torture, turning into hatred. Tyrande hesitated as well. However, any intelligent creature would be easily swayed by emotions. Even though they hadn't seen each other for 10,000 years, Tyrande still made up her mind to release Illidan when she thought of the 3 of them living in harmony 10,000 years ago. After all, blood was thicker than water. Under Tyrande's insistence, Malfurion had no intention of remonstrating. However, when she reached the cage, Tyrande received a firm rejection. The guard replied, "Illidan's storm rage is the most unforgivable of sinners. If Malfurion and you hadn't protected Illidan back then, he should have received the cruelest death sentence a long time ago." These guards were all diehard fans of Warden Mayev's Shadow Song. It just so happened that Mayev had temporarily left to provide support due to another prison being attacked by demons. Tyrande was furious. "I, the High Priest of the Moon Goddess, Tyrande Whisperwind, am the true leader of the Night Elves. I order you to open the prison and release Illidan's storm rage. Forgive me for not being able to comply." The leader of the guards replied. However, the words of one of the guards behind her completely ignited Tyrande's anger. This sentence was spoken in the ancient language of the High Elves. Of course, the words were even more vicious and bitter. Elegantly translated, this sentence was, "You still pretended to be so holy after coming back from the demons. Now, you finally can't help but want to take your lover back?" This was no longer a matter of being overwhelmed by anger. After Queen Azhara's group of High Elves fell and were cast into the deep sea, the Night Elves experienced 2 more upheavals before they formed the religious kingdom of Elun that was centered around nature. The first time was when the remnants of the High Elves led by Dethrima were exiled and renamed the High Elves. The second time was when the Druids, with Malfurion as the core, announced their neutrality and gave up their political rights. However, they formed the Cenarian Circle, an interracial organization that worshipped nature. Thus, Tyrant, who originally wouldn't start a massacre, gave the order, kill. Kill until blood flowed like a river. Kill until heads rolled. Finally, she even had her subordinates carve the reason for the massacre on the wall as an explanation to Maev's shadow song. In a sense, it was also to help Illidan, who was about to be released. Was there really nothing wrong with being imprisoned for 10,000 years by a guard who hated him? Who would believe that? When he opened the prison door and saw Illidan Stormrage, who was bare-chested and muscular but had his eyes covered, Malfurion still felt that something was wrong. His little brother was too calm. The saying that love begets hate, and hate begets love wasn't without reason. Only when one cared would there be emotional fluctuations. If a few of their own died, they might not be able to take it. But if 10,000 ants died in a faraway land, who would feel anything? The moment Malfurion saw Illidan, he felt that something was wrong. However, Tyrant, who he loved deeply, had advocated for Illidan, so he could only silently watch as Tyrant told him about the Burning Legion. The leader of the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is about to destroy Mount Hyjal, the World Tree, and devour the Well of Eternity. Illidan. Our people need your strength to once again resist the Burning Legion. Tyrant spoke passionately, but Malfurion's heart sank. If Duque was here, he would definitely scoff. However, this couldn't be blamed on Tyrant. All priests were extremely devout idealists. This was the complete opposite of a materialist like Duque, who had been educated by the Celestial Empire. However, idealists had a very magical ability. They would believe in things that others wouldn't. For example, Tyrant actually believed that Illidan was still thinking about their 10,000 years of love, and wasn't affected by the recent 10,000 years of suffering. That was why, even though Duque knew that Tyrant wanted to save Illidan, he definitely wouldn't get involved. Firstly, this was the internal affairs of the Night Elves. Secondly, he was afraid that if he saw Tyrant acting so emotionally, he wouldn't be able to help but slap her a few times. Tyrant, you can bathe in moonlight every night. Have you ever experienced the feeling of complete darkness? Tyrant's persuasion stopped abruptly. Tyrant, have you tried to contact Elun? You can't communicate with any living beings, and you can only spend a month in silence. Illidan. At this moment, Malfurion stepped forward. Illidan, Illidan suddenly raised his hand and stopped his elder brother. He stated his condition. I can agree to participate in the battle against the Burning Legion, but not for the Night Elves. I will fight for you alone, Tyrant. Chapter 896. A knight who protected the princess. That sounded good, didn't it? Unfortunately, Tyrant was destined to be unable to return this feeling. In the world of love, she had already sentenced Illidan to death. Illidan, who had rebelled, could not become the partner of someone who believed in nature and the way of Elun. Biting her lower lip, Tyrant's breathing quickened. She knew that as long as she gave a hint, a powerful hero would become a fighting force for the Night Elves. Could she do it? Malfurion, who also adored her, was watching from the side. She could only remain silent. Silence was her answer. She hoped to have Illidan as a fighting force, but she did not want to make any promises on personal matters. Illidan smiled. He stretched his muscles and then walked to the room that stored his unique weapon not far away. He took out the famous, Azeroth's dual blades, from the future. There were two of these two green crescent-shaped double-headed blades. Although their shapes were special, they were classified as one-handed swords. This set of legendary weapons originally belonged to the Burning Legion's Eridar Apocalypse Guard officer, Azeroth. Before the cataclysm of the ancient war, Azeroth was killed by an egg. Illidan stole Azeroth's weapons. 10,000 years later, Illidan could use them even better than the old owner of the blades. His greatest characteristic was his insane attack speed. When he activated the special effect of his greatsword, he was like a tornado. Even a thumb-thick piece of sashimi or an egg could be evenly sliced into hundreds of pieces in just a second. not to mention the enemy. Holding a pair of dual blades of Azonoth was like automatically learning lying corpse swordsmanship. With a gust of wind, all the enemies were lying on the ground. Regardless of whether Malfurion thought it was cool or not, if Duque was here, Illidan's action of crossing the blades behind his back would be super cool. Alright. What do you want me to do? I heard that the Burning Legion's vanguard is using a magic weapon called Gul'dan's Skull to pollute the Fellwood Forest. Malfurion and I are going to awaken more sleeping druids. Can I trouble you to purify the Fellwood Forest first? No problem. And so, Illidan led more than 100 archers and huntresses to the Fellwood Forest. The air of freedom didn't taste all that good. Because what was echoing in the air above Fellwood Forest was a scent that he was incomparably familiar with 10,000 years ago, the scent of demons. The night elves around him could not understand Illidan's thoughts. They were simply following Tyron's orders and following Illidan. Weak, too weak, Illidan muttered to himself. Sir, what are you talking about? I'm talking about me, but I'm also talking about you guys. Ah. The huntress leader's face immediately turned red, and she raised the spinning blade in her hand. I've been trained for 2,000 years, she babbled on, but Illidan wasn't listening. His thoughts had already returned to the ancient war 10,000 years ago. It was an era where demons danced wildly, and it was also an era where experts came forth in large numbers. The sky was filled with powerful dragons, but even the dragons that covered the sky were unable to resist the terrifying attack of the Burning Legion. As the ancient war gradually became more and more intense, the anger of the Burning Legion almost drove people to desperation. Even today, the new generation of night elves regarded the flying dragons as the most powerful existence, but they still continued to fall from the sky like dumplings. In that battle, Illidan desperately tried to stop the army that attacked Fort Raven. He constantly used mana burn, a terrifying skill that did not even let go of his allies. After burning all the mana in his body, those demons were just big targets. Illidan had always thought so. Compared to the efficiency of killing the enemy, the moon guards on his side were not worth mentioning after losing their mana and even their lives. Unfortunately, because of his extreme fighting style, he was removed from the position of leader of the mage army. This blow made him even angrier. In the end, Illidan also left the Night Elven army, but he embarked on a completely different path from his brother. He thought that arcane magic could not gain an advantage in war, so he turned to trying to understand and control the power of demons. For this, Illidan chose the most direct method, pretending to join the Burning Legion. Sargeras was very satisfied with this. He personally injected a great amount of power into Illidan through the portal, but this also made Illidan realize a despairing fact: the army attacking Azeroth was just a drop in the ocean. In the countless broken worlds of the twisting nether, there were more hungry demon armies than there were stars in the sky, and they were even more incalculable. What was more terrifying was that the demons could not be killed outside of the twisted nether. Unless their souls could be destroyed, their souls would return to the twisted nether, and soon they would reform into a new body. After learning this horrible truth, Illidan was even more adept at playing infernal affairs. 10,000 years of imprisonment had made Illidan extremely weak. An instinctive hunger kept tormenting him in his body. It was like the orcs who had been controlled by the demon blood of the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth. The evil demon power had a powerful addiction that outsiders could not understand. His breathing became rapid, and his senses became blurred. However, one thing became clearer in his vision. It was a cluster of black light that the night elves around him could not detect. Only the existence that had received the power of demons could clearly see that light pillar. You guys split up into small teams and hunt the demons in the forest. Come back here at sunset. Illidan sent away the sentries who did not want to stay by his side. Just 10 seconds later, Illidan tilted his head to the left and said coldly, "Come out. My eyes are blind, but the demon fire in my eye sockets allows me to see everything I should see." Yes. That was one of the consequences of playing infernal affairs 10,000 years ago. The Demon King, Sargeras, personally destroyed his eyes. After burning all the muscles in his eye sockets and even exposing part of his skull, what appeared in his eye sockets were two wisps of evil energy. The power of the same origin could not be hidden from each other. A pale-haired death knight wearing black skeleton-heavy armor appeared from behind the tree. The giant rune sword in his hand was emitting an unparalleled evil aura. It made Illidan subconsciously raise the twin blades of Azzinoth in his hand. You? Yes. Who? Illidan shouted. Death Knight Arthas Menethil. The king of Lordaeron across the endless sea. The most loyal servant of the Lich King. Chapter 897. Illidan's muscles twitched. If he still had eyes, it would have been a squint. Before I kill you, you better tell me why you're here. Huff. The air seemed to pass through Arthas's cold nostrils and escape to the outside world, but Illidan could sense the purity of the dark power in Arthas's body. Do you know what is corroding the Fellwood forest? The skull of Gul'dan. Illidan's lips curled into a mocking smile. Arthas was caught off guard, but he quickly reacted. You're right. But you're only half right. What do you mean? As if subconsciously, Illidan pointed the crescent blade in his right hand at the Death Knight's chest. It's the skull of Gul'dan. But you can't imagine how powerful this divine artifact is. Illidan was silent. Arthas' voice was full of temptation. As long as you absorb the power inside, with your talent, it's not impossible for you to become a demigod. Suddenly, a mocking smile appeared on Illidan's face again. If it's so powerful, why don't you use it yourself? Arthas spread his hands. Because I'm no longer alive. The dark power I use is born from the Burning Legion's dark powers, but it's different. To be precise, I use the power of death. Do you really think I'm asking about this? Illidan was already in a fighting stance. Arthas could only explain. My master, the Lich King, will be happy to see you steal this divine artifact from the hands of the demons. Ever since Archimonde descended, the scourge was taken over, and my master is not happy. He thinks it's necessary to teach those arrogant demons a small lesson. Of course, as subordinates of the Burning Legion, we can't do it ourselves. When Arthas said this, Illidan finally smiled. This explanation made Illidan finally happy. As someone who had once joined the Burning Legion, even if it was just an act, he knew more about the Burning Legion than most creatures in the world. Any large organization in the world would definitely have its own faction. Other than the core of the Burning Legion, which was the Eridar clan, which was also known as the Demon Clan in the eyes of the people of Azeroth, there were also the Dreadlord clan and the Abyssal Lord clan. It was not surprising that there was an additional Undead clan. Although none of them were good people, when it came to sincere cooperation, it was really laughable. From Tyron's brief explanation, Illidan knew that the Scourge army had been fighting for their lives in Azeroth for more than 10 years. Then, as soon as the Archerons arrived, they were taken advantage of. Illidan readily accepted Arthas's explanation. All right. I'll go to the skull of Gul'dan. Once I find out that you lied to me, even if I have to chase you to the ends of hell, I will let you taste the taste of pain. Just like that, the two men who stood at the peak of experts in this era separated from each other with their own little secrets. Arthas looked at the place where Illidan disappeared until she could no longer sense the evil night elf hero. She laughed coldly. Poor clown. Dance on the palm of His Majesty the Great Lich King. Originally, this little story would have ended here. Illidan would have fallen again, and the Lich King's Scourge army would have used this opportunity to escape from the Burning Legion's control. But, just as Arthas called for Kel Thuzad to open the portal, an accident happened. Crack! Without any warning, a golden light suddenly shot out from the void that was supposed to open the portal. Even though Arthas had fought many battles, he only had time to pull out a half-parry posture. It was a terrifying golden light that seemed to be able to split the entire chaotic dark world in half. The left shoulder of Arthas's epic armor was instantly shattered and evaporated in the golden light. Who is it? Although he was not injured, Arthas's shocked and angry voice was like that of a seriously injured beast. He had no idea who was sneaking up on him. Why would there be such a pure holy light user in the territory of the night elves who believed in the doctrine of nature? This was not some random paladin. The ones who came were definitely those who stood at the peak of the paladins. Arthas, who was screaming, did not intend to sit still and wait for death. Come out. My servant. An evil black aura suddenly exploded from his body. It was like throwing a big bomb into a calm lake. The sudden burst of dark power summoned more than 100 elite skeleton monsters in one breath. Some were giant bears that had been dead for a long time, and some were half-rotten nightsaber. They all broke through the shackles of the soil from all corners of the forest and crawled out to answer the call of their new master. However, it was useless. Another beam of golden light shot out from the void. It was different from the golden light just now. If the previous one was an invincible sword light, a sharpness that could cut through everything, then this one was a heavy hammer that could crush everything, a light that could purify the world. Arthas was incomparably shocked to find that the undead he had just summoned had actually turned into ashes in an instant. Around him, less than 10 centimeters above the ground, purple portals suddenly opened one by one in the air. What followed was a group of people that Arthas absolutely did not want to see. Alessandro? Are you here to avenge Tarina's? Arthas bit his lip. Humph. You killed the king's father's unfilial son. You have no right to call your father and me by name. Mograin's face was ferocious, and he looked like a small sun burning with golden flames. Arthas, after you killed your father, have you ever regretted it? As if he was joking, but also as if he was talking about something extremely serious, Sidan Dathrahan, who was carrying a huge long-handled warhammer, stepped forward from the left of Arthas. Don't talk too much to this fallen. Destroying evil is the duty of us holy light guardians. On Arthas' right, Turalian pointed the divine sword, Quell Zarum, at Arthas' neck. Just these 3 paladins alone were enough to make Arthas' scalp tingle. And that was not all. Behind him was Duque, who had his arm around Queen Sylvanas' waist. A little further away were Lilith, Riadaline, Jaina, Ronan, and Kale, that's. Other than Jaina, who seemed to be joining the battle, the other 4 were obviously guarding against the reinforcements that Arthas might find. An inescapable net. No way out. No way out. Fear from the depths of his soul spread throughout Arthas' body. Chapter 898. How is this possible? Why would Duque and his strongest subordinate appear here? Isn't this a top-secret mission that His Majesty the Lich King personally gave me? If Arthas could still sweat right now, then it would definitely be drenched in cold sweat. Other than the Lich King, only he and Kel Thuzad knew about the matter of seducing Illidan. Unfortunately, there was no time for Arthas to think about life. The dazzling light arrived in a flash. Along with his long golden hair that fluttered in the wind, Mograine was even more terrifying than a roaring lion with its bloody mouth wide open. The gigantic Ashbringer came crashing down, and the golden holy light that came crashing down like a tidal wave was enough to make Arthas' soul tremble uncontrollably. This attack reminded him of his teacher, Uther. Perhaps this golden light was not as pure and holy as Uther's. It was even mixed with anger that could be exploited in the eyes of a schemer. However, hatred of evil was also a powerful spiritual power. Under the extremely exaggerated enhancement of this divine artifact, there was a moment when Arthas felt that her power of darkness was as insignificant as a boat that was about to be engulfed by a monstrous wave. If Arthas was still the Arthas who had just killed his father and had not yet completely fallen, he might have been defeated by this attack. Things were different now. He was not afraid of a mere Mograine. Invincible. The Death Knight called out to his beloved horse. The undead warhorse, which had been dead for a long time and had long been firmly connected to Arthas' soul, leaped out of the void. In the blink of an eye, it had already become one with Arthas and his horse. It was a charge that was almost beyond the limits of what the naked eye could see. Mograine's furious attack easily turned the 120-degree fan-shaped area in front of him into dust. Arthas and his beloved horse weren't within this range, and they managed to rush out at the last moment by a hair's breadth. If not for Turalian's extremely calm interception, Arthas' escape would have been perfect. However, Turalian, who was known as the calmest and most intelligent of the 5 Silver Saints, had the most vicious attack. He took a big step forward and swept his sword horizontally. It looked like an extremely slow sword, but just when you thought it was far away, it was already within your reach in the next instant. Just when Arthas thought that there was only 1 foot left, the golden edge of the divine sword had already sliced open Arthas' eyes. Left with no other choice, Arthas abruptly sucked in her abdomen and tilted her neck back to avoid Turalian's attack. Turalian's attack was obviously an open and above-board attack, but it looked like a sneak attack. At this time, Cydane's holy warhammer arrived. Unlike her 2 rich companions who had divine artifacts, Cydane's warhammer was only of the epic grade. Of course, he did not dare to fight the famous Frostmourne head-on. However, as one of the 5 Silver Saints and the most skilled Holy Knight, he was the first Holy Knight to be able to use his hammer so skillfully. His steps were steady, and he always left some leeway in his advance and retreat. Then, the feeling that his hammer gave others was an embroidery needle. He was clearly aiming for Arthas' left shoulder, yet the hammer had landed squarely on the right side of her ribs. Arthas hurriedly adjusted the position of Frostmourne, but without even making contact, the huge hammer was easily swung away. By the time Arthas realized that this was an incomparably gorgeous feint, Mograine's next sword had already swept over with the Holy Knight's holy seal. Arthas croaked, "Despicable. Is this the way of justice of Holy Knights?" As soon as she finished speaking, the 3 holy light blasters immediately sprayed. Humph. Justice only exists between the people of conscience. Turalian was the most polite. Fallen one. Receiving the ultimate judgment is your only fate. Mograine fired directly. You want justice? I have the holy seal of justice here. Come, take it. Cydan was as glib as ever. Beside him, Duque was also speechless. Was this idiot really stupid? Talking about justice with a bunch of people who were born as swindlers? A holy knight who could not use holy light to fool the enemy was not a good holy knight. Hadn't they heard of the story of the 5 kidney warriors and the goddess that could not be told? Not only were holy knights unkillable, if you really wanted to reason with them, you would not be able to deal with them. Perhaps this was why when you dueled with a holy knight in the game, it would often turn into a bladder match, and whoever could hold in their urine the best would win. But in a war of attrition, Arthas with a normal brain knew that it was disadvantageous. The 2 holy light artifacts were a great threat to him. If it was a one-on-one, he was confident that he could win with the shameless trade of Frostmourne, but 1 against 2 was already a bit difficult. 1 against 3. Unless he opened up a gap in a short time, he would be exhausted to death. This was what Duque planned to do. After all, Arthas was not the Lich King who could beat up many strong people. So he knew that Arthas would definitely choose to break through. And the direction to break through was naturally Cydan Dathrahan. Among the 3 muscular men who were besieging the idiot, only he did not have an artifact. If he did not break through, who else would he break through? After hanging around in Azeroth for so long, Duque had figured out that the first prerequisite for the so-called hero domain was to become a professional who was proficient in the 3 major talents of the profession. For example, if a mage was not proficient in frost, fire, and arcane, they would be embarrassed to call themselves an archmage. As one of the 5 Silver Saints, Cydan of course liked to play with a 2-handed hammer. Like playing golf with a fly ball, a downward swing would directly hit a zombie's head dozens of meters away. This was his favorite entertainment on the battlefield. But against Arthas, Cydan could not be too careful. In the face of the counterattack of Frostmourne, since he was holding a 1-handed hammer in his right hand, Cydan's left hand was, of course, a shield. The epic shield that directly blocked was unsurprisingly destroyed by the rune greatsword. So what? Cydan had already predicted that the shield would explode. Even the direction of his arm to block was parallel to the magic sword. The moment the shield exploded, he directly diverted the force and dodged. Anyway, Mograine and Turalian would be able to kill him in the next moment. What infuriated Arthes the most was that Sai Dan had brought more than a dozen epic tier shields with him. He was constantly conjuring shields from his storage space. Even if one of them was destroyed, he would immediately replace it with another in the blink of an eye. One had to know that Arthes was almost taking the fierce attacks of the others. After dodging Mograine's slash with great difficulty, he had to take several attacks from Turalian on unimportant parts before he found the opportunity to attack Sai Dan. Not to mention, he was also taking the surprise attacks of Servanas and the woman he once loved the most, Jaina. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.